咁但係而家咧我要轉一轉個 thumbnail 啊，因為而家呢個咧太核突啦，轉一轉先。咁咧基本上而家4位證人咧嘅證供咧，我目前睇咧就係有3個係打咗份證供出嚟嘅。咁最期待嗰個咧就我暫時未睇到有手寫嘅證供啊。最期待嗰個就係喺美國太空總署做過嘅嗰位啦，叫 Mike Gold 啦。因為咧一路以來傳出嚟嘅消息咧都話美國太空總署咧喺 UFO 就住 UFO 問題咧係比較少參與嘅。咁但係今次嘅證人竟然係有一個係 NASA 嘅人咧，咁就大家都有啲期待啊。好，我仲係搞緊個 thumbnail 啊，睇下先 edit 單咗去邊啊？依個靚仔啲啦，應該嗰個原本嗰個太過低清啦。我睇下先啊。好似靚仔啲啦。好啦，咁咧仲有50幾分鐘，咁我哋而家睇下佢真係出咗嘅手寫證供先，逐個睇一睇下。呢度都係啲新嘢嚟噶啦，睇下先啊。Lockheed， 因為成日都Lockheed 咧就呢個比較關鍵嘅公司嚟嘅，因為成日都話啦，有個好受歡迎嘅講法就係話UFO 所謂嘅 UFO 殘骸，羅茲威爾嘅 UFO 殘骸喺邊度呢？就係喺啲私人企業度，喺啲同美國政府有合作，為美國政府提供製造武器嘅私人航天公司度。咁其中一個最出名嘅就係 Lockheed 啦。Lockheed Martin 呢間公司咧就係幫美國政府做咗呢個 F-117 戰機嘅。咁咧有個講法就係話，當年收埋咗啲殘骸去咗邊呢？就去咗呢啲公司度啦。因為當年係掌權嘅人咧，就覺得政府咧就保守唔到秘密嘅，咁樣於是咧就將呢啲 UFO 殘骸咧就送咗去呢啲同美國政府有緊密合作嘅武器公司度。咁係Lockheed 就係幫美國政府整呢架隱形戰機噶啦。咁咧就你每逢關於 UFO 嘅新聞咧，呢間公司就成日都會出嚟嘅。咁睇下啦 ，Lockheed CIA story in the spotlight， 睇下先啦。Mike Gold 咧係啦 ，Mike Gold 份證供係揾到咧，究竟 About what I call the Lockheed CIA story count have refused and played， 哇好長，睇下先啊。係而家咧基本上4個證人咧大家最重點留意咧就係 Mike Gold 啦，因為冇聽過佢講嘢，其他嗰3個咧會講咩咧？基本上大概都知8成9成噶啦，因為佢哋經常上網台節目做訪問啦。唯一咧就係 Mike Gold 咧。係比較少出嚟講嘢噶，好，你而家睇一睇啦。Senior Manager for Bigelow Aerospace，Bigelow Aerospace 又係一個有錢佬啦，但係對 UFO 係非常之熱衷嘅。咁咧佢就係Robert Bigelow 啊，就係酒店大亨嚟嘅，做酒店起家嘅。咁之後發咗達咧，就開始發展航天公司啦，發展航空嘅公司啦。咁之後咧，亦都又係同美國政府有好多合作嘅，因為佢喺航天科技嘅發展。係Bigelow Aerospace key is a player in the Lockheed CIA story， 好就係佢嗰間公司啦 ，Robert Bigelow 嘅嗰間公司。Sorry， sometime 07到10年 ，James Ryder 一個死咗嘅人 ，Vice President at Lockheed Martin，Head of AT Center Advanced Technology Center。It was believed to be out of Lockheed custody。好，呢個咧就係話有個故事嘅，就係話好啦 ，Lockheed Martin 呢間公司咧，我睇下點樣可以準確啲描述 Lockheed Martin 呢間公司啊。Lockheed Martin ChatGPT describe Lockheed Martin to me the company space 就係負責呢個 航天同埋防守，叫國防啦 ，missile defense、cyber security、defense contractor、Chinese traditional。哇，太多嘢啦 ！Ethics and controversy。航空航天防務安全公司最大嘅防務承包商係啦，就係話幫美國政府就會外判啲 project 咧俾呢間公司，咁樣就為美國政府咧提供呢個國防嘅科技嘅，基本上就係一間咁嘅公司啦。咁 Mike 哥今日就應該會講咧，就係話呢間公司嘅副主席啦，就嘗試咧將佢哋幫美國政府收埋嘅 UFO 科技咧，就運翻出嚟，就俾翻國防部。咁但係咧 CIA 好似係否決咗嘅，個故事就應該係咁樣。Short-lived OSAP 呢個 UFO program 咧，我冇記錯應該係同 ATIP 一樣嘅，睇下先啊。OSAP係啦 ，OSAP 係就係想將私人嘅公司咧俾翻國防部，私人嘅將 UFO 咧由 Lockheed Martin 呢間公司運翻去國防部。Henry Reid blocked by a senior CIA official. Weekly source account as Glenn Gaffney. For collection， 即係而家直頭指名道姓啦，話呢條友阻止。Account very widely as to the nature of disputed materials. Joe Rogan Experience, David Grush. House structure, like house structure 即係咩意思咧 ？Like house structure 我都唔係好明佢講咩啊，睇下先啊。Like house structure, like house structure. Framework, house structure, body and shipboard, other watercraft。好啦，我都係唔好明嘅。To Chinese 船體結構 ，OK。好，呢個就真係雖然有人提過啊，但係咧。主流 UFO 界咧都冇咩點講呢件事嘅。Want to divest of material. Yes. Suppose what Lockheed want to turn over to DIA。DIA 係 Intelligence Agency。Director of 睇下先 ，DIA 係乜鬼嘢啦？Defense 係國防情報機構。好。Bits and pieces of whole structure. Actual whole 話唔係純粹一部分嘅，係直頭成架非人類，即係成架 UFO， 即係唔係淨係得一部分 UFO 殘骸，有成架 UFO。Possibly interstellar space-time travel。而且佢哋係有收埋到嘅。About description, what did you say? Alleged interference in the material. Disease. Due to the harshness of exchange with CIA official. lack of attribution。睇下先。播少少歌先，有啲太靜啦，係咪啊？呢個啦。好認真睇一睇先。上一次Try to do the right thing for the United States of America。佢而家就係話咧，基本上係UFO 咧 ，UFO 殘骸咧喺一間私人機構度收埋咗啦，就話應該係當年羅茲威爾事件咧就係真嘅。咁嗰架 UFO 殘骸咧就喺呢間 Lockheed Martin 嘅機構度收埋咗。咁咧07-08年嘅時候咧 ，Lockheed Martin 嘅副主席咧係話諗住將呢架 UFO 咧俾翻美國政府嘅，但係美國政府咧國防部 DIA 嘅副部長就反對呢件事，反對美國政府接收翻 UFO 科技。呢單嘢咧就係由 Dr. James Lacasky 都係情報局入邊嘅科學家咧喺鏡頭面前同大家講過嘅。咁今次聽證會唔會講呢件事咧？寫低翻啲 notes 先。Lockheed CIA story。 睇下今日會唔會問呢個問題咧？就係、最主要想知嘅嘢，呢個真係。如果真係揭露真相啦，睇下會唔會做到一單大新聞啦？即係傳媒會唔會喺今日之後咧報道呢件事 ？Lockheed CIA story。Into the hands of。但係就冇發生到，因為咧就係俾呢條友 ban 咗，將 UFO 由私人企業 Lockheed Martin 俾翻美國政府呢件事冇發生到啦，就係因為俾呢條友 ban 咗啊！呢個叫做 Glenn Gaffney。呢條友邊個先 ？Glenn Gaffney。查一查先，我係印象中有見過呢個名嘅，早兩日。Former Director of Science and Technology at CIA, Secretive Advisor。我嚟睇下先啊。
Multiple sources have confirmed that Glenn Gaffney, the former head of the Directorate of Science and Technology and gatekeeper of the UAP Deep Legacy Program, was handpicked by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick to be on this advisory board. I must emphasize this.
好啦，今日咧就睇下佢會唔會將呢條友擺上台啦，聲稱係佢咧阻止呢啲 UFO 新聞咧公開嘅，即係美國擁有 UFO 科技呢件事公開嘅。我再睇下其他消息先。好。Inspector General。好啦，總之就冇發生到啦。UFO 殘骸俾翻美國政府呢件事冇發生到。好啦，咁就睇下今日會唔會問呢件事啦。呢個 Glenn Gaffney 呢樣嘢咧會唔會提及到啦？呢個人名。好，但係咧，Jacob Bell 就話都係做翻少少總結啦吓。 Bell possession all the time. Lock it. 好 ，Crush 就咁講 ，Jacob Bell 就咁講。James Ryder，OK，清楚少少啦。而家就係總而言之，就係 UFO 殘骸落入咗喺私人企業手上邊。07年嘅時候咧，呢間私人企業嘅副主席咧就想俾翻呢啲 UFO 殘骸俾翻美國政府。咁但係咧就俾 CIA 入邊嘅其中一班人阻止咗。咁用咩原因阻止咧？暫時都應該係未睇到嘅，我仲未見到。好，睇下先。USG 係咩嚟㗎？Control unclassified information。今次聽證會嘅重點咧就擺咗喺 Mike 高度啊，睇下佢會唔會講，睇下會講啲咩啦。RJP records to Nara. Staff is assigned to search out. 不過唔係講笑，未開始啦，我已經有少少攰啦，仲有半個鐘到。Mount Schumer UFO disclosure。我覺得呢條係究竟係咩議案嚟嘅咧？查一查先。Bike rounds。好。好有趣嘅就係咧，美國唯一頭幾樣係唯一罕有地係 bipartisan， 即係兩黨都有共識嘅議案咧，就係 UFO 議案。即係見到兩黨好少就任何議題咧有共識嘅，唯一 UFO 議題咧就係兩黨都會推動嘅議案啦，即係話促使政府咧要公開 UFO 嘅資料。成日都話啦，國防部入邊咧係有大量嘅 UFO 相片啊、影片啊係高清嘅，咁就可以令到大家冇懸念地肯定啊 UFO 確實存在啦，非人類嘅科技確實存在啦。咁但係一路都唔公開啦。首先議會唔知係一件事啦，因為議會咧係有權監察晒政府所有嘅資料嘅，議會都唔知係已經係一樣違反憲法嘅一件事，唔俾公眾知，公眾係咪應該對呢件事有知情權呢？呢個係拗緊嘅。咁但係議會都唔知咧，就肯定係犯法噶啦。Michael Schellenberger，
is credible。
睇下 James Lukaski 講咩先。
Right? Is that what you
I do.
implied?
It's credible, but I'm simply saying he worked with someone that I know and trust as the UAP task force.
So let me just go one last time. So basically, David Grush, what he told us, you both feel that that information is credible, right? Is that what you
I do.
implied?
It's credible, but I'm simply saying he worked with someone that I know and trust as the UAP task force leader, and I think you should take his statements. Now, whether or not, if we could just take a moment here, I've observed to Colin something that is, I'm looking at it particularly in regard to UFOs and the paranormal. There are people who have written, have talked about things they are absolutely wrong about, but they totally believe it. You can't call them liars. They totally believe it. Now, how many of those people that David Grush came across are fit in that category? I could name a list of them right now, but I won't. I mean, obviously, I respect their opinions, but I know what they're saying is false. So it's a phenomenon now. I certainly hope that does not spread across all topics on the internet, because we're in big trouble if that's the case, because that means people are, is delusional the correct word? I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I don't know.
我哋而家非常之有趣，而家
Yeah, but
係
hold on, because we don't have Grush here to talk about.
等緊 UFO 直播
He
啊
talks！about program names. He talked about program names. He talked about holding locations of UFOs, which you've already admitted that we've got them and we've been exploiting them. So he's talking about things that are very tangible and physical. People that worked on UFOs, those programs. So part of the 40 witnesses that came forward to him are people that actually worked on these legacy UFO programs, which he says exist. We've talked about it. All the four of us have talked about it. We know UFO legacy programs have existed, whether or not you can talk about it or not. We know that they existed. So just to give, kind of looking at what he said, he's saying that there are individuals with direct firsthand experience. It's not opinions they could be wrong or right about. It's whether or not these programs existed, and we have these craft we've been working on.
Okay, and I have seen in multiple cases what I would can only call forged documents. So.
Okay, so there's another thing we should talk about. So what do you mean by that? There have been forged documents.
They're documents talking about programs that are not legitimate documents.
Within intelligence servers, within your industry, there are forged documents inside of our government's, or what are you talking about? Just on the internet?
I'm
are you talking
about both.
Really? How could that happen? Forged documents with inside our intelligence agency server.
They even covered this on an X-Files episode. Every special access program has a counterintelligence officer. That's their job. It's their job. So, you might say, well, wait a minute, Jim and Colin are counterintelligence officers. No, we're not. There's no reason to be. But if you're in a program, you have that person either assigned to you or you bring them in, and there's a source of forged documents right there. Go have your listeners and readers go back through the UFO history, and you'll see fingers pointing to others that, again, I won't name them, that, hey, this is all fabricated. And
like Rick Doty. That's who you're talking about, maybe.
Can't say.
Oh, hold on. Here's George. Here's George. He's going to say something. Go ahead, George.
Which counterintelligence officer wrote this in Skinwalkers at the Pentagon on page 152?
Okay, wait a minute.
He'll read it.
152.
Yeah. Sasha Mover and Jim Bell began knocking on doors beyond DHS to connect with, quote, the keepers of the secrets in at least two other agencies. In these meetings, which took place July 2011, Sasha, Jim, and colleagues were treated rudely and harshly. Bell and Mover were repeatedly told no and hell no. This left them convinced that advanced technology was sequestered under government supervision at aerospace contractor facilities. As a result, the DHS facilities, Department of Homeland Security officials, became very hesitant and even fearful of moving forward. Perhaps these two only belatedly realized the unique, game-changing, and earth-shattering nature of the biggest secret ever kept by the United States. Is that counterintelligence stuff, or did you two guys write that?
Well, we wrote that and it was approved by the Pentagon and by DHS. Okay. But the thing is that that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about plain out forged documents that are shown as proof of something. And it's
我而家就講緊咧話，國防部入邊咧有啲資料咧係特登偽造出嚟嘅。咁我暫時聽到咧，佢嘅意思就係話點解要特登偽造啲資料出嚟咧？就係我係一個反滲透嘅手法嚟嘅，即係嗱，我要再聽翻佢成段訪問啊。咁但係暫時我聽到嘅咧就係呢啲假資料咧係我嚟反滲透嘅。中間嘅話咧就係 Dr. James Lukaski 啦，就係國防部入邊嘅科學家嚟嘅。右邊嗰位咧，我唔知佢係邊個，但係依集咧我會聽翻嘅。咁但係咧，暫時我發現嘅嘢咧就係最左邊呢位咧就係UFO 嘅記者啦。佢之前亦都出過套紀錄片，就係講 Bob Lazar 噶啦。Bob Lazar 就我做過段片就係講 Bob Lazar 嘅，就係喺1960幾年嘅時候，有個人走出嚟話美國政府有個設施，有個秘密基地就叫做 Area 51區啦，就叫 Area 51啦。咁佢就喺入邊做啦，而入邊咧美國政府係收埋 UFO 科技嘅。咁就係60幾年時候嘅故事啦。咁我而家發現一樣嘢就係乜嘢咧？就係美國政府入邊咧係有一班人咧嘗試公開 UFO 資料嘅，陸續去公開 UFO 資料啦。佢哋嘅講法就係話核武當然係唔可以公開啦，核武嘅資料。咁但係研究核子呢方面嘅研究核能呢樣嘢嘅係可以公開噶嘛。佢哋嘅諗法咧就係一樣啦 ，UFO 都係啦。關於 UFO 嘅科技點樣製造武器方面呢樣方面嘅嘢，當然唔可以公開啦。咁但係 UFO 背後嘅科學咧，佢係覺得應該公開出嚟俾所有科學家探討嘅。咁咧所以你而家見到陸續有好多軍方錄得嘅 UFO 影片咧，就會浮咗出嚟啦。咁佢哋係經點樣將呢啲影片放出嚟咧？我發現咧係基本上係成日都係用佢放出嚟嘅，用最左邊呢條友叫Jeremy Corbell 啦。即係佢經佢放出嚟嘅片咧，基本上就唔係民間偽造嘅，就係確實係軍方錄得嘅嘢啦。咁仲有20分鐘到就有直播，咁所以咧我係會再由頭睇翻一次佢放過出嚟嘅片嘅。咁有啲咩片咧？呢個係個背景音樂嚟啊。好，我哋睇下 Jeremy Corbell。一開始 TikTok 而家最多人講 TikTok 嗰段片咧，就係佢放出嚟嘅，即係 TikTok UFO。冇記錯 To the Stars Academy 啦。嗰個就係我要再查翻先，但係佢放出嚟嘅片咧，我哋可以基本上幾肯定咧，就唔係偽造嘅，因為佢係有線人嘅，基本上即係基本上軍方放嘢出嚟咧，基本上都係用佢啦，用經佢放啦，因為佢即係好多 UFO 關心 UFO 嘅人咧，都係睇佢嘅，即係所以話呢啲片咧就係話呢個。佢聲稱係海軍錄到嘅片啦，就係 Pyramid 啦、三角形 UFO 啊，呢啲可以落到水嘅 USO 啊，由海軍錄到嘅嘢啊，基本上咧都唔使諗噶啦，係確實係軍方放出嚟嘅。因為咧佢放完之後啦，即係佢3年前放啦，4-5年後咧你就喺聽證會見到呢啲片噶啦，即係。軍方決定呢啲檔案可以解密啦，可以公開啦，咁佢就會收到風咯。所以我會合集翻佢放出嚟嘅 UFO 片啦。 咁就再揾一下佢背後嘅故事。好啦，而家呢一個咧 Nancy Mace 咧就係今次聽證會嘅主席啊。咁咧依間大多數嘅發問咧都應該由佢開始噶啦。就係話 UFO 議題咧就係唯一美國政府、美國政界咧兩黨都有共識嘅議題，即係兩黨咧都認為佢哋係應該知得更多嘅。公眾要知幾多咧？佢哋再討論啦。但係首先議會係要知先，因為咧係合乎憲法噶嘛，即係憲法上美國政府係唔應該隱瞞任何嘢係議會唔知道嘅，即係議會係應該知道晒美國政府有嘅資料嘅。呢個就係 Article 1啦，即係。點解會有個人權記者喺今日出現呢？喺今日作供呢，就係話你哋國防部收埋啲嘢唔俾議會知咧，呢樣嘢係違法嘅、違憲嘅。Article 1，美國憲法第1章就已經寫明啦，美國國會咧係應該有全權監察嘅能力嘅，對於美國政府所有機構。咁就當然唔係成個議會都會知道晒所有政府嘅秘密啦，因為議會有成500幾個人噶嘛，同埋每2年選一次，咁咧。好容易外泄噶嘛，如果所有機密資料都俾晒500個人知嘅話，所以咧就淨係得8個人先知道晒所有嘢嘅，就叫做 gang of 8啦，即係8人幫啦。咁就係兩黨民主黨、共和黨嘅領袖，同埋一啲本身有從事開情報工作、監察情報工作嘅議員。咁一路以來喺依8人幫最出名推動公開 UFO 資料嘅就叫 Henry Reid 啦，咁佢過咗身嘅啦已經。咁但係咧就話佢晚年嘅時候咧，一路都話係我肯定我會確保拜登肯簽完呢單議案咧，我先會走嘅，即係先會離開嘅。咁佢就真係佢確實啦，就係拜登簽完呢單俾議會監察 UFO 事件嘅議案之後咧，咁佢過咗幾個月就真係走咗啦。咁就而家睇下仲有幾耐啦，15分鐘到，再睇下少少資料咯。咁就呢一集真係要睇翻 Forged Document， 睇下啲留言先。好，睇下 Michael Gold，Michael Gold 都交咗咯，佢嗰份證供。就係講 NASA 啦，一路以來咧 NASA 都比較少講嘢嘅，就 UFO 議題，因為 NASA 成日都好啦，佢哋就係負責，佢哋有好多望遠鏡啊，有好多衛星啊，監察緊太空嘅事啦。一路以嚟咧就係話我哋見到咁多億光年以外嘅太空領域啦，但係都未揾到有任何生物跡象。咁所以咧，所謂嘅 UFO 現象咧，就唔係由外星人引致嘅，因為佢哋都見唔到外太空有生物跡象。咁今次咧 Michael Gold 今次作證嘅 Michael Gold 咧，就係由 NASA 嚟嘅，就係喺 NASA 做過嘅。咁就大家都覺得好奇怪啦，因為 NASA 一路都話，佢哋唔關 UFO 事噶嘛，即係 UFO 事件佢哋冇參與，唔關事噶嘛。咁點解會有個 NASA 嘅人今日作供咧？好，佢就係啦 ，NASA 咧幫喺 UFO 問題上邊咧係可以有 input 嘅，係可以參與嘅，因為 NASA 咧有好多資訊係關 UFO 事嗱，真係咧一路以嚟都冇呢個講法噶。NASA 有資訊可以解釋到 UFO 嘅謎，佢就話 NASA 咧可以寫個程式出嚟，咁樣就去抄翻晒所有政府現有嘅資料，去揾下咧有冇 UFO 現象。咁呢個寫程式啫，好 technical 嘅嘢啫。咁我都信 NASA 真係做到嘅。可以寫個程式出嚟，翻查翻晒所有現有嘅資料，睇下有冇關 UFO 事嘅嘢出現。 咁但係呢度睇下，應間嗱今日咧佢哋會證人會講嘅嘢咧，我哋基本上知道佢哋會講咩噶啦，因為已經打晒出嚟。咁個關鍵要睇咩咧？就係睇議員問咩問題啦，同埋佢哋點答啦。我哋都未知議員會問咩問題嘅。咁就睇下佢今日呢度話 NASA 有好多 data 就會係同 UFO 關事嘅。咁佢想講咩咧？另外一樣嘢咧就係都係啦，科學家度想講嘅嘢啦，即係就住 UFO 議題，科學家都係話，要公開呢啲資料啦，因為咧越多科學家去參與研究咧，就越快揾到，就越快解釋到呢啲所謂嘅謎啦，越快咧係同埋係對我哋嘅科研咧有好處嘅，因為越多人研究咧就更快揾到答案。咁所以咧，美國政府唔可以收埋嘅。咁但係美國政府嗰班軍人咧就話：喂，如果將啲資料公開，咁俾美國、俾俄羅斯早我哋研究到嘅話，咁咪出事咯咁樣。咁所以有個軍人同埋科學家之間嘅角力喺度啦。咁但係佢就話啦，嗱，所有嘅科研嘅突破咧，都係由研究啲不明現象開始嘅，都係啦。喺一啲異常嘅情況，一啲異常嘅行為咧，係經常可以令到科研咧有突破，咁所以咧，好多科學家都話啦，我哋唔應該睇呢啲所謂嘅不明現象咧，唔應該戴有色眼鏡去睇嘅，應該從一個科學嘅角度去睇嘅。有異常嘅情況發生咧，就唔應該成日都俾人標稱，你講 UFO 就係迷信，你講 UFO 就係神棍，就係嗰啲精神失常嘅人。咁咧有一班科學家成日都話啦，喺呢啲嘢咧係應該用科學角度睇嘅，睇下係咪係真係有異常情況啊？啲人睇錯啊，定還是係點樣？即係你唔可以下下咧就話冇咁嘅事就冷眼旁觀唔理嘅。咁有幾個好權威嘅科學家都係咁講啦。第一個就係 Avi Loeb 啦，就係哈佛嘅物理學家啦。咁佢就成立咗 Galileo Project 啦。咁咧就要喺全世界好多聲稱有 UFO 出現嘅地方咧，就擺攝錄機喺度，咁就嘗試去錄得呢啲現象啦。咁佢就係啦 Galileo Project 啦，其中一個。另外一個 Gary Nolan 咧，亦都係就係 Stanford 嘅微生物學家啦。咁佢咧亦都係好鼓勵大家咧用科學嘅角度去了解 UFO 事件嘅。咁佢兩個咧都經常上網台做訪問嘅。Gary Nolan 睇下佢呢排咩講先。Gary Nolan 嗰個 account。Gary Nolan 咧本身係一個好犀利嘅、好權威嘅科學家啊。咁佢喺 Stanford 咧，佢喺史丹福大學咧，自己有個實驗室啦。喺佢嘅實驗室入邊咧，發明嘅儀器啦，係因為佢嘅儀器咧係創立咗幾間公司嘅，而呢幾間公司咧係上咗 Nasdaq 嘅，上咗納指嘅，即係上咗市。佢成立嘅公司咧有2間係上咗市，而且係佢賣咗啦。即係佢基本上係一個百萬富翁又好，千萬富翁又好，佢係因為科研咧係發咗達嘅。咁佢嘅研究咧亦都係有望咧可以將癌症咧從呢個世界從此消失啦，令到癌症。因為咧佢嘅驗血機咧就應該係會令到我哋好早知道癌症喺一個人嘅身體出現。開咗5分鐘到，睇下啦。好啦，7000幾人睇緊啦，呢個就係個 official channel 嚟嘅，即係立法會 official 嘅直播頻道。點解我成日都講 Gary Nolan 咧？即係如果你有睇佢嘅訪問咧，佢講嘅嘢咧同所謂嘅偽科學咧係好似嘅。咁但係佢係一個有機會攞諾貝爾獎嘅人，即係好多人都有傳啦。佢今年就應該攞唔到啦。12月會公布諾貝爾獎名單咧，即係會頒諾貝爾獎啦。佢今年就應該攞唔到。咁但係咧，佢係有望咧，係大熱嚟嘅。基本上佢年年都係大熱嚟嘅。因為佢做嘅嘢咧係好有可能可以根治到癌症啦，即係好早就發現癌症喺一個人身上出現嘅話，咁基本上咧你越早醫咧 基本上就唔係絕症嚟嘅 cancer。咁佢嘅驗血機就做到呢樣嘢咯，好早喺人類身體入邊揾到癌細胞。咁佢其中一個理論就係話點解有啲人會更加容易見到 UFO 咧？就係其中一個腦嘅一部分咧比較發達啦。佢話 Gary Nolan、Godate、Putman， 佢就話咧，睇下先啊。係啦，呢個就係佢講嘅，其中呢部分咧就比較發達。佢就話，因為 CIA 咧揾佢去睇一啲機師嘅腦掃描啊，佢就見到咧聲稱目擊過 UFO 嘅機師嘅腦部嘅呢一個位咧都有受傷嘅。咁佢就話啦，佢就有個假設啊，就話同埋呢啲機師同一時間咧就係呢個部分，呢個腦嘅呢部分咧都非常之發達。咁佢就話啦，呢個咧就好似硬件咁樣，呢個腦部越發達嘅人咧就更加容易見到 UFO 嘅。咁係佢講嘅嘢啦，一個好有機會攞諾貝爾獎嘅科學家講嘅嘢。仲有幾耐咧？差唔多啦，應該聽下歌先啦。而家睇下 Twitter 有咩新資訊啦。呢個就係今次 UFO 聽證會嘅主持啊嘅 chairman。最主要咧都係講呢幾個 point 嘅啦，都估到噶啦。UFO 就係講要透明啦，同埋有收埋啦，有 hidden data 啦，政府有收埋嘢啦 ，hidden docs 啦，要公開啦 ，UFO 係真噶啦 ，real。唔係偽造出嚟噶啦，美國政府真係有收埋啦。咁而家重點就係睇下所謂 NASA 喺呢件事嘅參與啦。因為一路以嚟咧都好少聽話 NASA 有參與嘅。成萬幾人睇緊啦，已經即係 official 嘅直播。應該仲有5分鐘到啊！我個 timer 較早少少。點樣教返啊？算啦，唔好搞啦。好啦，仲有5分鐘到。唔記得咗點搞喎，熄咗個 timer。大家都喺度等緊啊！我都改一改個標題先。好，聽證會。佢今次開個 topic 咧就開到好大啦，就係揭露真相。咁係唔係真係有爆炸性，即係真係會出嚟講話外星人喺地球咧？咁就應該唔係嘅。好多記者都估咧，都應該唔會太過爆炸性嘅啫。 咁啊，頭先成日講嘅 Gary Nolan 咧都話啦，點解佢認為 UFO 資訊可以公開咧？因為佢覺得咧，基本上就算而家當阿 Trump 出嚟講啊，當阿特朗普出嚟講話外星人存在咧，大家可能都係會震驚10分鐘、20分鐘到，但係聽日嘅生活咧都係一切如常嘅。即係佢意思話，只要唔影響大家去返工，唔影響大家生活咧，基本上一切如常嘅。咁我都幾同意佢嘅講法嘅，即係可能同好多香港人一樣啦，就係唔影響返工，唔影響生活就冇事。咁我都覺得係嘅。佢就話美國人咧，基本上都係一樣嘅。就算而家 OK， 好啦 ，my check。熄咗個音樂。會講啲咩咧？美國政府收埋資料，需要有透明度。UFO 現象係真嘅，有呢個問題。咁睇下 NASA 嗰個喺 NASA 做過嘢嗰個會講咩啦？咁但係大家喺度估會唔會有新嘅片呢？會唔會有新嘅相呢？係應該冇嘅。咁但係有一單新嘢就有提及過，咁就係比較少提及嘅，就係話有一架 F-22戰機咧就俾一群發光嘅球體包圍住啦，就逼咗呢架 F-22戰機咧要偏離佢原先設定嘅航道，即係逼走咗呢架 F-22戰機。咁呢單嘢我係未聽過嘅。咁今次作供會講啦，阿 Michael Schellenberger 人權記者會講啦，同埋有一單係就話有片，話美軍有片係喺國外錄得嘅片，咁亦都係冇聽過呢單新聞嘅事前。睇下先啊 ，Schellenberger 先加得。同埋有一個係海洋生物學家啦，同埋海軍啦，就話潛艇咧佢喺潛艇入邊咧都目擊過UFO 現象嘅，就叫做 USO 啦，水底嘅 UFO 現象啦。Schellenberger 嗰份嘢喺邊啊？睇下先。先搞得。依份係 Michael Schellenberger。好，佢就話係啦，呢個就係講翻 F-22戰機嗰單嘢啦。同埋佢有一單係喺邊度咧？話有高清片段嘅。而家啲人火滾嘅咧，就係話出嚟講嘢嘅咧，永遠都係有一班人揾到一啲秘密檔案，咁咧就出嚟講翻秘密檔案入邊講啲乜。咁可唔可以揾一班係寫呢啲檔案嘅人出嚟講咧？即係所謂嘅 first hand、second hand 啊，即係呢班人出嚟講嘢嘅咧，都係複述佢哋揾到啲乜嘢。咁我有冇可唔可以揾一啲係真係寫呢份 report 嘅人出嚟咧？咁今日咧應該係見唔到嘅。同埋會唔會有新嘅相咧？會唔會有新嘅高清嘅影片咧？咁都係應該冇嘅。咁所以咧，有一班人好火滾嘅就係咁樣咯，就係不停有人出嚟講故仔。咁有冇確實嘅資料啦 ？James Fox。Another 係呢度 small orange red sphere。啲橙色發光嘅球體啊，係喺邊度啦？係啦，就話有段片係13分鐘長嘅，高清有顏色嘅，喺海嗰度冒咗出嚟。係啊，科威特事件呢單嘢咧，係我冇聽人講過嘅。咁佢出嚟講就話有段咁嘅片，咁你講冇用嘅，show 段片俾我哋睇先得噶。咁但係你今日咧係應該大家都估計咧係唔會有片 show 嘅，即係都係聽人講故仔。咁就係重點就係 NASA 嗰條友會講咩啦，因為佢冇出過嚟講嘢。 同埋大家一路都以為咧 NASA 係喺 UFO 事件係唔係好關事嘅。咁睇下 NASA 條友講咩，同埋議員會問啲咩，就係今日嘅重點啦。因為佢哋證人嘅作供咧，基本上已經擺晒上網啦，已經 upload 晒去政府嘅網站度啦。好，上年咧就係3個鐘嘅，呢個 UFO 聽證會，咁就有3個人作供啦，就係 David Grush 啦，就係空軍嘅情報員啦，同埋2個戰機機師，咁2個戰機機師都成日出嚟講嘢嘅，就係 David Fravor 同埋 Ryan Graves，咁都係話佢哋目擊到UFO 現象啦，咁就係最出名嗰個 TikTok 現象啦 ，TikTok UFO 啦。好大聲嗰段片，好啦，熄咗聲，就係呢單係 gimbal 嚟嘅，呢個唔係 TikTok 嚟嘅。咁但係就係呢個 TikTok 現象。咁點解成日都會講 TikTok 現象咧？就係因為 TikTok 嗰個現象咧，就係有機師見到啦，雷達見到啦，航空母艦上邊嘅監測員都見到啦，即係幾方嘅資訊，幾方嘅 source 都係見到。咁就唔係淨係靠一個人嘅口供啦。仲未開始。點解會有人權記者牽涉呢件事呢？今日作證嘅呢，其中一個就係 Michael Shellenberger 啦，就係人權記者。咁呢就係原因上年嘅聽證會呢，David Grush 就話有人因為嘗試公開 UFO 資料呢而被殺害嘅，即係美國政府因為想揞口呢，就殺人滅口嘅。咁樣，所以今次就有人權記者介入啦，就話點解政府內部有一班人咁堅持要唔公開 UFO 資料呢？除咗係佢哋覺得公開 UFO 會引致恐慌之外呢，就係話佢哋過去為咗冚住消息呢，做咗好多污糟邋遢嘅嘢，包括殺人啊、恐嚇人啊，逼到人哋精神失常啊。咁所以就係有今次點解會有人權記者參與嘅原因，就係話係啦，美國政府喺冚住 UFO 消息嘅過程入邊呢，做咗好多唔恰當嘅嘢。上年就話係包括有殺人嘅。睇下 Twitter 有咩消息啦。咁今次聽證會咧，你如果去華盛頓咧，係可以排隊入場嘅。咁但係就其實冇咩意思啊，喺屋企睇仲舒服。呢個係議員啦，今次都會在席嘅一個議員。咁陣間睇下佢問咩問題啦。就話啦，華盛頓班人使你嘅錢，但係又唔同你講發生咩事，咁就係覺得不恰當啦。呢條友就入咗去睇啦。咁而家睇下先，5分鐘前入邊啲議員都好似未到喎。好多人都等緊啦。 佢其中一個議員咧，今日仲提出咗一個立法嘅，咁啊有冇過到咧？我都唔知佢份議案係有冇過到嘅咧。我頭先都見到係話佢有交一條動議嘅。我聽到聲啦 ，follow 翻呢條友先。呢條友 post 嘢都好啦，係咪開播啊？
Good morning. This joint hearing of the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovation, and the Subcommittee on National Security, the Border, and Foreign Affairs will come to order.
呢個人就係 Nancy Mace 啦，主席啦。咁之前咧有傳出過咧話今次聽證會會取消嘅，咁佢就出嚟講啦，洪水地獄內咧聽證會都係會如期舉行嘅。咁佢就係堅定要開聽證會嘅一個議員啦。
Whose subcommittee held an important hearing on this topic last year. I want to thank my colleagues on the Oversight Committee, including Mr. Burchett, Mr. Burleson, Ms. Luna, Mr. Moskowitz, Mr. Garcia, for their relentless drive to get answers on UAPs. They've been steadfast in demanding transparency on the sightings reported by military pilots and armed forces. Their commitment to digging for the truth is exactly what this country needs to cut through the secrecy surrounding this issue. And many high-ranking individuals in the military and intelligence communities believe UAPs demand greater attention, and thus the purpose for this hearing today. Former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster said on Bill Maher's program that, quote, there are phenomena that have been witnessed by multiple people that are just inexplicable by the science available to us. Army Colonel Carl Nell, a member of the federal government UAP task force, said at a conference this past May that non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing, and there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that. But UAPs remain a controversial topic. I'm not going to name names, but there are certain individuals who didn't want this hearing to happen because they feared what might be disclosed. But we stood firm. No amount of outside pressure would ever keep me.
有人唔想今次聽證會舉行嘅，咁但係佢哋堅持啦。
On that score, I want to thank our witnesses for being here. We have before us a panel of individuals accomplished in the military, in civilian government, in science, and in journalism. Some of the testimony you will hear them deliver today does not reflect well on influential individuals and agencies within the U.S. federal government and perhaps some of our contractors. It's never easy to present such information publicly. So I appreciate our witnesses voluntarily agreeing to being here today. This hearing is intended to help Congress and the American people to learn the extent of the programs and activities our government has engaged in with respect to UAPs and what knowledge it has yielded. This includes, of course, any knowledge of extraterrestrial life or technology of non-human origin. If government-funded research on UAPs has not yielded any useful knowledge, we also need to know those facts. Taxpayers deserve to know how much has it been invested, how much has been spent. They shouldn't be kept in the dark to spare the Pentagon a little bit of embarrassment. The reality is, despite their enormous taxpayer-funded budgets, the transparency of the Defense Department and the intelligence community have long been abysmal. The Pentagon has failed 6 consecutive audits. In fact, it's never actually passed one. Adding to this is a runaway overclassification of materials, a reluctance to declassify materials.
成日咧都有赤字嘅國防部，條數咧永遠都唔 balance 嘅。我冇記錯咧，國防部係達到 trillion 嘅，條數唔 balance 啊。
So Congress has tried in recent years to lift the veil and find out if information about UAPs is being withheld. Not only from the American public, but also from their elected representatives.
佢就係想講國防部有冇挪用資源啦，藉住 UFO 議題亂咁使錢啦。
In the Pentagon, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or ARROW, but the new office is struggling to get its footing. A recent statutorily required report from ARROW, intended to illuminate the government's historic assessment of UAPs, was heavily criticized by those seeking UAP transparency. The report has stoked suspicions AARO is unable, or perhaps unwilling, to bring forward the truth about the government's activities concerning UAPs. I'm disturbed that AARO itself lacks transparency. Even its budget is kept from the public. So if there is no there, then why are we spending money on it, and by how much?
係啦，究竟使緊幾多錢呢？
If it's really no big deal,
成日都話冇 UFO 問題，冇 UFO 現象，咁我哋使緊啲錢係用緊嚟做咩嘅咧？咁佢就係佢啱啱所講嘅嘢。佢頭先亦都話好多謝今次嘅證人會行出嚟啦，因為佢哋係講嘅嘢咧，基本上係同 CIA 啊，同好多軍事武器嘅承辦商咧係對着幹嘅。咁佢哋覺得好勇敢啦，佢哋。
About a purportedly secret UAP program whose existence and findings may have been improperly withheld from Congress. But before we get to the witnesses, we're going to have a few more opening statements from our colleagues. And one thing I wanted to add at the end of my closing statement is there is a document that will be entered into the congressional record today. Mr. Tim Burchett from Tennessee has this document, and we just distributed it to every member up here on the dais of this document. But this is going to be the original document from the Pentagon about Immaculate Constellation that Michael Schellenberger delivered to Congress today. So thank you, Mr. Schellenberger, for this information. We are all reading it in real time now, and Mr. Burchett will enter it into the record. But 12 pages about this unacknowledged special access program that your government says does not exist. So with that, I would acknowledge my colleagues, Mr. Garcia. I want to say, first of all, to Mr. Connolly, who cannot be here today, the ranking member on my subcommittee on cybersecurity, I want to say that I was greatly saddened to hear about the recent news of Mr. Connolly's cancer diagnosis, and I want to convey to him and to all of our colleagues, we wish our very best to you and a full and speedy recovery.
有新資訊啊！啱啱記者咧今日先提交份檔案，係關於最新公開嘅 UFO 檔案啦 ，Immaculate Constellation， 就係大家今日先收到嘅。Garcia.
This discussion and these hearings in a way that's bipartisan. I think one thing that's very important for all of us that are interested in the conversation around UAPs is that this is an area that both Republicans and Democrats, where we may disagree in a lot of other spaces, this is an area where bipartisanship is really important. And in fact, I would add it's critical that we all continue.
唯一兩黨有共識嘅議題啊，就係 UFO 議題。
The truth and important disclosure. So we're here to have a bipartisan and serious conversation, I believe, about our national security. We should always ground these conversations in facts, evidence, and the data in front of us. I want to note that we have our witnesses here, and I want to thank you all for being here, and note that also amongst you have folks that have also served us in our military. And I know that for many of you, this has been a difficult process, but I'm very grateful to have you with us today, and thank you for joining us. I also want to note that today's hearing builds on a quite, I think, also historic public hearing that we had many months ago that Mr. Grothman and others helped lead in this very same hearing room, where I believe we began a really important public conversation about UAPs. And so I want to thank him for that, and I especially want to thank Chairwoman Mace for her continued advocacy on this topic. I also want to start with some facts. We know that there are objects or phenomena observed in our airspace, as our witnesses will testify, and also possibly in our oceans. In many cases, we don't know what they are, and this is, of course, why we're discussing UAPs. Now, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, has reported hundreds of UAPs that remain, quote, uncharacterized and unattributed, and which, quote, appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities and require further analysis. This is our own AARO office. Now, we shouldn't prejudge what they might be. I'm certainly not going to. We need evidence. But what we are detecting things, and we know that we don't understand them, and this is worth investigating. Now, the American people have legitimate questions, and I believe it's critical that Congress should help address them. This is about the truth and science and facts. Now, transparency and faith in our institutions is vital in a good democracy. Now, I'm proud to say that this hearing will build on that important bipartisan work, and I want to thank everyone for being involved, including members of our committee. Now, in our last hearing in July, we heard testimony that a significant number of pilots of major airlines have witnessed UAPs as well, but have no real confidential way of reporting them to the government. We heard that commercial pilots who encounter UAPs may be hesitant to speak openly due to stigma or fear of retaliation. We also know that Aero has reported that, and I want to quote, that most reports still reflect a bias towards restricted military airspace, a result of reporting from military personnel and sensors present in such areas. And so the lack of ability for civilian pilots raises real safety concerns and limits our ability to understand UAPs.
其實話咧，好多民航嘅機師咧都目擊到一啲唔尋常嘅嘢嘅，咁但係咧佢哋就冇一個正常公開嘅渠道咧去 report 去匯報呢啲嘢，同埋佢哋都好驚啦，俾人哋標籤成為一個黐線佬，話見到 UFO。
And that would create a safe reporting for UAP process, which we want to continue to do. Now, members of both parties and senior officials in multiple administrations have now taken an interest in this issue.
佢就係希望建立一個正常嘅渠道啦，咁等一啲機師如果見到 UFO 現象咧，有一個正統嘅渠道可以匯報到，就唔使俾人當係黐線佬。
And getting to the facts of what these UAPs actually are.
大家係想知道真相啫。
And Republicans in Congress can work together to cut through misinformation and look for a serious and thoughtful way to have the discussion in public. Many of us have also called for additional public hearings to discuss UAPs. This should be a topic that continues on throughout the Congress so that we can gather more information, data, and work with the relevant agencies to gather more information. Finally, I just want to add that those that are here on this dais, many of us have participated also in classified briefings as well, and where we have also gained a lot of important, I think, and interesting information, at least I personally have. And so with that information, we want to continue today's hearing, and I thank all of our witnesses for being here. And with that, I'd like to yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia, and I'd now like to recognize Mr. Grothman for a 5-minute introduction.
Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here one more time. This is a topic I've been interested in since 8th grade. I'd like to thank Ms. Mace for working with me on this topic and for making this a joint subcommittee hearing. Last year, the Subcommittee on National Security, the Border and Foreign Affairs held an historic hearing to understand the potential national security risk of unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs. We heard from former Navy Commander David Fravor, who shared firsthand experience with a UAP engaged while on duty in the Pacific. We learned from David Gresh, a former member of the intelligence community, who revealed the supposed existence of secret government programs hidden from congressional oversight. Additionally, former military pilot Ryan Graves informed us of the limited ways in which the military and commercial pilots can report UAP sightings. Since that last hearings, I've led several briefings with government agencies to deepen my understanding with these issues. First, the Department of Defense Inspector General's Office informed us that the Department of Defense does not have a streamlined process for service members to report UAP activity. Since then, the Joint Chiefs have implemented standards for UAP reporting across the services. The Intelligence Community Inspector General informed us that whistleblowers often fear retaliation for reporting mismanagement.
好多人都唔夠膽出嚟講嘢啊！咁啊，上年 David Grush 都話啦，有人因為嘗試出嚟講嘢咧而被殺死嘅。咁係咪真呢？
It's faced challenges in its establishment, specifically in hiring staff to manage UAP historical records.
David Grush 就話啦，佢上年嘅證供咧係經過內部調查咧係查證到佢係講真話嘅。內部調查就係 ICIG 啦，就係、我唔想講監警會啦，咁但係美國係有個監警會制度嘅，咁就係監察佢哋嘅情報人員。咁就係啦 ，ICIG 個負責監察情報人員嘅人咧，就檢視過 David Grush 喺上年嘅證供，咁就話佢講嘅咧係屬實嚟嘅，佢講嘅係屬實。咁佢上年就講過話，有人嘗試公開 UFO 資料而被殺害。咁睇今次點啦？而家暫時都係啲議員啊，即係開呢個會嘅議員喺度講下啲簡介啦。就話佢哋嘗試尋找答案，嘗試發掘、尋找真相。 咁希望
of the massive drone
證人想出嚟講嘢咧，
that flew
係
over
唔會受到
Langley Air Force
打壓
Base
嘅，
in
唔會受到
Virginia
威
last
脅嘅。
December. Langley is the home of the 1st Fighter Wing, which maintains half of the F-22s in the U.S. Air Force inventory. Reports of this incident indicate these drones were roughly 20 feet long, flying more than 100 miles an hour at an altitude of over 3,000 feet. Yet the origin of these drones and their operators remains a mystery. This incident and other sightings near sensitive military installations highlights the complexity of the UAP challenge facing our intelligence, defense, and homeland security committees. Whether these phenomena are the result of foreign adversaries developing advanced technologies or something else entirely, we must take them seriously, investigate them thoroughly, and assess
要認真看待 UFO 現象啊，唔好再戴有色眼鏡啦，覺得講呢啲嘢嘅人咧係黐線嘅。
underscores the need for innovative defensive strategies beyond traditional measures. They also highlight the urgent need for updated policies to address emerging threats as well as more effective interagency cooperation and intelligence sharing. However, none of this is going to be possible without transparency.
要增加透明度啦，都
Far
係
too
講
long,
翻。
critical information about UAPs has been either classified or ignored, leaving the American public and key congressmen without clarity needed to make informed decisions. Declassifying reports and fostering a more open dialogue about UAPs will not only increase the public trust, but also encourage collaboration between government, the scientific community, and our allies. Quite frankly, there's been things that have been kept secret that is, I think, old enough that there is no reason it shouldn't be released, regardless of any so-called, private information.
佢話係時候要公開啦，呢單嘢都講咗好耐啦。
patterns and develop new strategic defenses. As we continue to investigate these phenomena, we must do so with a mindset of protecting our country, advancing scientific discovery, and upholding the trust of the American people, who right now I don't think have trust, and it's just obvious I don't have trust. We cannot shy away from the unknown, especially when the stakes are so high.
不過咧，美國人咧基本上就唔相信個官方個 講法啦，佢自己都唔信啦。係時候查呢件事啦。
Actually, the idea is just to say, in my mind, go back 15 years and everything has to be released. I'm hopeful that we can learn from their testimony and come out of this hearing. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. I will now recognize Mr. Moskowitz for a 5-minute introduction.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Good morning, everyone. I first want to thank the chairs and ranking members for holding the hearing today on this topic and, again, having a second hearing. I want to thank the witnesses for coming forward today to share your
仲係一班議員喺度講緊嘢啊。
need to build trust through transparency. But first, I want to mention, you might be wondering why Chairman Comer has allowed me to be a ranking member today, but it's really only because our dear friend, Jerry Connolly, is not here. As Chairwoman Mace mentioned, he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, and all of us on this committee know Jerry, and he's a fighter.
係其中一個議員咧確診咗癌症，所以咧佢就喺度啦。
marks this committee's second meeting dedicated to UAP transparency. I was pleased, as I know all of us are, on the bipartisanship that existed in last year's hearing, and even though we can't talk about what happens in the classified settings, the bipartisanship that has existed in those settings with the questions members have asked. Last year's hearing was a great example of open dialogue about UAPs, and we must remain committed to sharing information with the American people. And I think you see that commitment based on the people here and the commitment across the political spectrum. I personally have worked with multiple members of this committee, but I want to particularly thank Congressman Burchett, Mace, Luna, and Garcia for working on bipartisan pieces of legislation. In recent years, Congress has taken numerous bipartisan steps towards greater transparency. In 2022, in the NDAA, we created the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office to investigate unidentified flying objects. Following AARO, along with ODNI, released an unclassified report on UAP sightings. Of the 366 sightings included in the report, 171 remain uncharacterized, with some of these appearing to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. That's a nice way of saying we don't want to tell you what they are. In March, ARROW revealed a report on the historical record of U.S. government involvement with UAPs, which covered investigatory efforts going back from 1945 to the present day. Earlier this year, I joined Congressman Burchett to introduce the UAP Transparency Act, which would require the declassification of all documents related to UAPs with many other members of this committee. In fiscal year 2024, the NDA required the National Archives and Records Administration to establish the Unidentified Anonymous Phenomena Records Collection. This collection will include digital copies of all unidentified UAP records that can be publicly disclosed. This commitment in transparency is vitally important and unnecessary.
佢頭先講嘅其中一樣好有趣嘅嘢咧，就係話上年聽證會開完之後咧，佢哋成班議員係有同泄密者 David Grush 咧喺一個冇公開嘅場合開過一次會嘅，就叫做 Skiff 啦。佢哋會入去一個房係非常之保密嘅，咁就確保冇人偷聽到佢哋講嘅嘢啦。佢哋喺入邊開咗一個會嘅，咁入邊咧 David Grush 係應該同佢哋交代咗更加多嘅資訊嘅，交代咗更加多唔想大眾知道嘅資訊。即係所以其實佢哋呢班議員咧係應該知道更加多嘢嘅，更加多細節嘅，更加肯定某啲細節嘅。佢哋係應該睇到一啲即係成日都話 first hand 嘅檔案啦，一啲相啊，一啲高清嘅影片啊。咁樣嘅。
The information and oversight that they have tasked us for. It's part of this, government agencies must maintain open lines of communication with members of Congress.
問題就係我哋幾時會見到呢啲影片、呢啲高清影片、呢啲高清相咧，去肯定 UFO 唔係我哋做到嘅科技咧。
Right? And now we've seen this has gone from a long time ago where you could discredit people because it's some guy living.
咁就啦，究竟啲 UFO program 係點樣攞到撥款嘅咧？理論上撥款係佢哋撥噶嘛，係依班議會嘅人撥款噶嘛。點解連佢哋撥款嘅都唔知，而佢哋又可以攞到公帑去做呢啲嘢嘅咧？
Almost 15 years ago, one of those came out of Area 51. To go after Osama bin Laden. And the only reason we know about that is because one of those helicopters was downed. Americans have questions about whistleblowers who have come forward to talk about retribution. And so I want to thank everyone for being involved.
泄密者咧受到威脅啊！而家多謝翻啲證人啦，夠膽行出嚟講嘢。
And as we get into a new administration, the president-elect has talked about opportunities to declassify
而家講侵侵啦，就 Donald Trump 咧嘗試去公開 UFO 嘅資料。第一個提及 Donald Trump 嘅議員啊。
Now, committee staff asked me to go ahead, and I will do it to enter into the congressional record this 12-page document that Michael Schellenberger brought today that describes the Immaculate Constellation government program. So we will do that now.
有份檔案咧係今日先交嘅，即係咧網上面都見到，就係講關於 Immaculate Constellation 啊呢個最新爆出嚟嘅 UFO 計劃。
Representative Luna just told me if I say Immaculate Constellation, I'll be on some list. Maybe a FISA warrant, so come at me, bro, I guess. But
佢話啦，提及呢個字咧 ，Immaculate Constellation 咧都會受到監察，即係佢話你要監察我咧，就監察得嚟啦咁樣。
Thank you so much for being here. Our first witness is retired Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, who retired from the U.S. Navy and is now the Chief Executive Officer at Ocean STL Consulting. Our second witness is Mr. Lou Elizondo, a former Department of Defense official and author of a recent bestseller book about UAPs. Our third witness is Mr. Michael Schellenberger, founder of the newsletter Public, and author of a recent journalistic piece about special access programs, including one widely identified as Immaculate Constellation
係佢爆出嚟嘅。後邊啦，你見到記者啦 ，Jeremy
Corbell。Michael
Gold 就係大家最期待嘅咧，就係 Michael Gold， 因為佢冇上過任何網台講嘢嘅，而且佢係由 NASA 過嚟嘅。
Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise your right hand.
好啦，而家宣誓啦。
Do you solemnly swear to affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses all answered in the affirmative. We appreciate all of you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your written statements and they will appear in full in the hearing record. You guys may be seated. Please limit your oral statements to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button in front of you so the microphone is turned on so that everyone in the room, members included, can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes has expired, and we would ask that you please wrap it up. So I will first recognize Rear Admiral Gallaudet to please begin your opening remarks.
海軍上將，今次會講水底嘅 UFO 現象。
Ranking members Connolly and Garcia and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify today regarding unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP. Confirmation that UAPs are real came to me in January of 2015 when I was serving as the commander of the Navy Meteorology and Oceanography Command. At the time, my personnel were participating in a pre-deployment naval exercise off the U.S. East Coast. It included the USS Theodore Roosevelt Carrier Strike Group, and this exercise was overseen by the United States Fleet Forces Command, led by a 4-star admiral who at the time was also my superior officer. During this exercise, I received an email on Navy's secure network from the operations officer of U.S. Fleet Forces Command. The email was addressed to all the subordinate commanders, and the subject line read in all capital letters, "Urgent Safety of Flight Issue." The text of the email was brief but alarming, with words to the effect, "If any of you know what these are, tell me ASAP. We are having multiple near mid-air collisions, and if we do not resolve this soon, we are going to have to shut down the exercise."
不過有一日咧，收到 email， 我見到一大班 UFO 爭啲令到戰機相撞。咁就係而家 Go Fast Video 啦 ，YouTube 成日都見到嘅 Go Fast Video。
Classified video showed an unidentified object exhibiting flight and structural characteristics unlike anything in our arsenal. The implication of the email was clear. The author was asking whether any of the recipients were aware of classified technology demonstrations that could explain these objects. Because the DoD policy is to rigorously deconflict such demonstrations with live exercises, I was confident this was not the case. The very next day, that email disappeared from my account and those of the other recipients without explanation. Moreover, the commander of Fleet Forces Command and the operations officer
當日個警報 email 咧，突然間唔見咗啊！
Even during weekly meetings specifically designed to address issues affecting exercises like the one in which the Theodore Roosevelt Strike Group was participating. This lack of follow-up was very concerning to me. As the Navy's chief meteorologist at the time, I was responsible for reducing safety of flight risks. Yet it appeared to me that no one at the flag officer level was addressing the safety risk posed by UAPs. Instead, pilots were left to mitigate these threats on their own without guidance or support. I concluded that the UAP information must have been classified within a special access program managed by an intelligence agency. That is a compartmented program that even senior officials, including myself, were not read into. Last year's UAP hearing before this oversight committee confirmed that UAP-related information is being withheld from senior officials and members of Congress. And just this week, I learned from former DoD official Chris Mellon that satellite imagery of UAP from a few years ago still has not been shared with Congress. Equally concerning,
有衛星見到嘅相咧，係冇公開嘅。
disinformation campaign to include personal attacks designed to discredit UAP whistleblowers. Having never signed a non-disclosure agreement regarding UAPs, and now as a private citizen, I've become an advocate for greater UAP transparency from the government. The continued overclassification surrounding UAPs has not only hindered our ability to effectively address these phenomena, but has also eroded trust in our institutions. While I applaud previous bipartisan legislation passed by Congress concerning UAPs, a more comprehensive approach is needed to address the broader implication of UAP on public safety and national security, as well as the socioeconomic opportunities that open UAP research could unlock. Therefore, I recommend Congress take the following action, which I believe will receive bipartisan support. First, establish robust oversight of the executive branch's management of UAP information by directing key officials, beginning with the director of the DoD's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, to provide comprehensive briefings on what the government knows about UAP and does not know. 2, enact the provisions of the UAP Disclosure Act that establish a UAP Records Review Board to ensure independent oversight, transparency, and accountability in the government's handling of UAP information. And 3, strengthen the UAP Disclosure Act and future reauthorizations with provisions that mandate a whole-of-government approach to addressing UAP. In closing, I will share my personal reasons for speaking out on this topic. First, as a former science agency leader, having led the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, I've always sought the truth in human knowledge and thought. Now that we know UAP are interacting with humanity, and these include unidentified submerged objects in the ocean, we should not turn a blind eye, but instead boldly face this new reality and learn from it. Additionally, at a time when leaders in government leave much to be desired, I feel obligated to show moral leadership on this issue of UAP disclosure by validating the credibility of the courageous men and women who have come out as witnesses and whistleblowers to expose the truth. My speaking out has encouraged others to do the same, and it's my hope over time that a number of your constituents will want to know the truth and about UAP, and this number will increase to such an extent that the congressional action I've just recommended will become inevitable. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I will now recognize Mr. Elizondo for his opening statement.
生到啦，國防部
Chairwoman Mace,
研究
Chairman
UFO 嘅計劃
Ranking
ATIP
members
嘅領
Connolly
頭
and
人。
Garcia, and members of the committee. It is my honor and privilege to testify before you on the issue of unidentified anomalous phenomenon, formerly known as UFOs. On behalf of our brave men and women in uniform and across the intelligence community, as well as my fellow Americans who have awaited this day, thank you for your leadership on this important matter. Let me be clear. UAP are real. Advanced technologies not made by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe.
UFO 係
Furthermore,
真
the
嘅。
U.S. is in possession of UAP technologies, as are some of our adversaries. I believe we are in the midst of a multi-decade secretive arms race, one funded by misallocated taxpayer dollars and hidden from our elected representatives and oversight bodies.
納稅人嘅
For
錢
many
咧
years, I was
被
entrusted with
挪
protecting
用
some
啊
of our，
被
nation's
亂
most
使啊。
sensitive programs. In my last position, I managed a special access program on behalf of the White House and the National
佢
Security
而家講
Council.
緊 ATIP program 啦。
As such, I appreciate the need to protect certain sensitive intelligence and military information. I consider my oath to protect secrets as sacred, and I will always put the safety of the American people first. With that said, I also understand the consequences of excessive secrecy and stovepiping. Nowhere was this more apparent than in the aftermath of 9/11, which many of us remember all too well. I believe that America's greatness depends on three elements. A watchful Congress, B, a responsive executive branch, and C, an informed public. Over the last decade and a half, I learned that certain UAP programs were and are operating without any of these elements. Although much of my government work on the UAP subject still remains classified, excessive secrecy has led to grave misdeeds against loyal civil servants, military personnel, and the public.
佢話政府的而且確係有 UFO program 咧，係大家都冇權監管嘅，議會都冇權監管嘅。而佢覺得呢樣嘢非常之有問題，就係啦，係咪可以亂用納稅人嘅錢呢？
Along with many of my former colleagues. This includes unwarranted criminal investigations, harassment, and efforts to destroy one's credibility. Most Americans would be shocked to learn that the Pentagon's very own Public Affairs Office openly employs a professional psychological operations officer as the singular point of contact for any UAP-related inquiries from citizens and the media. This is unacceptable. Many of my former colleagues and I have provided classified testimony to both the Department of Defense and the Intelligence Community Inspector General, and many of us have subsequently been targeted by this cabal with threats to our careers, our security clearances, and even our lives.
佢哋出嚟講嘢嘅人咧都俾人恐嚇啊。
Genuine fact, and this is wrong. To fix these problems, I propose three
受
principal
到生
actions.
命嘅威脅添。
First, Congress and the President should create a single point of contact responsible for a whole-of-government approach to the UAP issue. Currently, the White House, CIA, NASA, the Pentagon, Department of Energy, and others play a role, but no one seems to be in charge, leading to unchecked power and corruption. Second, we need a national UAP strategy that will promote transparency and help restore the American public's trust at a time when the public's trust is at an all-time low. This strategy should include a whole-of-government approach, including the academic and scientific communities, the private sector, and our international partners and allies. Third, Congress should create a protected environment so whistleblowers desperate to do the right thing, can come forward without fear. As it currently stands, these whistleblowers suffer because of stigma, a code of silence, and concerns about retaliation. These whistleblowers should be encouraged to come forward in ways that protect them against any forms of retaliation. Policies and procedures should ensure that protection, and for those who refuse to cooperate, it is up to the members of this committee and the other lawmakers to wield their subpoena power against hostile witnesses and prevent additional government funding to those UAP efforts that remain hidden from congressional oversight. In closing, we as Americans have never been afraid of a challenge. In fact, we thrive on them, whether it's eradicating polio or going to the moon. We don't run from a challenge, we take it head on. To the incoming administration and Congress, I say to you, we need immediate public transparency. And this hearing is an important step on that
都係
journey.
講透明度
We
啊！
approach the UAP topic in the same way.
你頭先話所有嘢都保密晒咧，就係會釀成悲劇嘅。咁就要講翻911事件啦。咁佢係有參與好多911嘅反恐計劃嘅，喺佢本書入邊有講到。
And I also believe the world deserves the truth. Thank you, esteemed members of Congress, for your time today.
市民係有權知道真相嘅。
By many.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent for Representatives Ogles of Tennessee and Boebert of Colorado to be waived onto the subcommittee for today's joint subcommittee hearing for the purpose of asking questions. Without objection, so ordered. I would now like to recognize Mr. Schellenberger for his introductory remarks.
人權記者啦。
Chairman Mace, Chairman Grothman, Ranking Member Connolly, Ranking Member Garcia, members of the subcommittees, thank you for inviting my testimony. One of Congress's most important responsibilities is oversight of the executive branch in general and the military and intelligence community in particular. Unfortunately, there is a growing body of evidence that the U.S. government is not being transparent about what it knows about unidentified anomalous phenomena, and that elements within the military and the IC are in violation of their constitutional duty to notify Congress of their operations. President-elect Donald Trump and former President Barack Obama have both said that the government has information about UAPs that it has not released. There are other explanations for UAPs than that they represent a new form of life or non-human life. Current dominant alternative theories, including those put forward by AARO, are that UAPs are some kind of natural phenomena we don't yet understand, like ball lightning or plasma. They could also be part of some new U.S. or foreign government weapons programs, such as drones, aircraft, balloons, CGI, hoaxes, or birds. Whatever UAPs are, Congress must be informed, as must the people of the United States. We have a right to know what UAPs are, no matter what they are. However, we now have existing and former U.S. government officials who have told Congress that AARO and the Pentagon have broken the law by not revealing a significant body of information about UAPs, including military intelligence databases that have evidence of their existence as physical craft. One of those individuals is a current or former U.S. government official acting as a UAP whistleblower. This person has written a report. This is the report that says the executive branch has been managing UAP, NHI issues without congressional knowledge, oversight, or authorization for some time.
NHI 係 non-human intelligence， 非人類嘅智慧。
the name of an active and highly secretive DoD unacknowledged special access program, or USAP. The source of that document told me, that the USAP is a strategic intelligence program that is part of the U.S. military family of long-standing, highly sensitive programs dealing with various aspects of the UAP problem. The new UAP whistleblower claims that the U.S. military and IC database includes videos and images taken using infrared, forward-looking infrared,
有相有片段係冇公開嘅。
The report that was just shared with Congress says Immaculate Constellation serves as a central or parent USAP that consolidates observations of UAPs by both tasked and untasked collection platforms. Immaculate Constellation includes high-quality imagery intelligence and measurement and signature intelligence of UAPs.
有高清圖啊，但係都冇公
Sources
開
of。this intelligence are a blend of directed and incidental collection capabilities, positioned in low Earth orbit, the upper atmosphere, as well as military and civilian aviation altitudes and maritime environments. The report to Congress details in detail various UAPs, including spheres, orbs, disks, saucers, ovals, triangles, boomerang, arrowhead, and irregular organic. The report describes various incidents found in the human intelligence databases. One involved orbs surrounding and forcing an F-22 out of its patrol area. In another incident, the crew of a Navy aircraft carrier watched a small orange-red sphere rapidly descend from a high altitude of 100 to 200 yards directly above the flight deck of the CVN, or aircraft carrier. And since my reporting on this immaculate constellation last month, another source came forward who told me that they saw a roughly 13-minute-long, high-definition, full-color video of a white orb UAP coming out of the ocean approximately 20 miles off the coast of Kuwait. It was filmed from a helicopter. Then halfway through the video, the person said the orb is joined by another orb that briefly comes into the frame from the left before rapidly moving again out of the frame. The person discovered the video on SIPR, the Secure Internet Protocol Router Network, which the DoD uses to transmit classified information. A leading UAP researcher who utilizes the Freedom of Information Act
啱啱講呢段咧就係新嘢啦，就係科威特嘅海岸咧拍到一段13分鐘長嘅 UFO 片段，一個白色嘅球體。咁之後咧有另外一個白色嘅球體咧出現，即係總共有2個白色嘅球體。呢樣咧係真係以前係從來都冇聽過嘅。同埋 F-22事件咧，有架 F-22被一班橙色嘅球體包圍住，逼佢咧遠離航道。咁睇下係咪有片咧？會唔會有新片出咧
？The DoD organization Arrow has been labeling many documents with a B7 exemption, which Greenwald says does not make any sense. They're stating that anything Arrow does is involved in law enforcement investigation, which allows Arrow to not release it. Greenwald says that the DoD has denied the existence of a UAP and ATIP-related records on multiple occasions, only to acknowledge them after an appeal was filed. He added that the Naval Air Systems Command in March 2022 stated they found no additional UAP videos. It seemed strange that they had 3, and only those 3, but other requests had been filed by the Black Vault, that's John Greenwald's group, to seek out more places UAPs might be hiding. Then, in September 2022, the Navy admitted that the UAP-related videos and photographs existed, but denied the request in full for their release, saying that the requested videos contain sensitive information that are classified and exempt from disclosure. The DoD will deny things on a Monday and then admit to it on a Friday, said Greenwald. He said the government can and does release videos that protect secret methods of capturing it. They fall back on the sensitive platform excuse a lot, he said. However, the on-screen information can be blurred and scrubbed. The metadata can be removed. I'll show you this example here. This is a presentation from the UATP task force. This is completely absurd. It's nuts, this level of censorship, of redaction on a document. It shows the redaction of how many reports they've collected, for how many years.
查得太多嘢啦，呢份資訊。
Explanations are blacked out.
呢份公開嘅資訊咧，半版都係全黑嘅。即係你話公開咧，基本上都冇公開嘅，半版資料都冚住咗。
Thank you. I would now like to recognize Mr.
嗰份資料我係有嘅，我有 download 到。
Thank you, Chairman Mace, Chairman Groffman, Ranking Members Connolly and Garcia, Representative Moskowitz, and distinguished members of both subcommittees. I'm grateful to all of you as well as your intrepid staff for the opportunity to testify, and would like to begin by discussing courage. Courage is what it takes to tackle this topic, and courage in the face of adversity is what I see in front of me, beside me, and behind me. Per my introduction, I am currently the Chief Growth Officer at Redwire Space and have had several leadership positions at NASA. That being said, I want to be clear that I am speaking exclusively on my own behalf and not for Redwire, NASA, or any other organization. However, I am here today to speak out for science. Science requires data, which should be collected without bias or prejudice. Yet, whenever the topic of UAP arises, those who wish to explore the phenomena are often confronted with resistance and ridicule. For example, members of the NASA UAP Independent Study Team, particularly those in academia, were mocked and even threatened for simply having the temerity to engage in the study of UAP. Our best tool for unlocking the mystery of UAP is science, but we cannot conduct a proper inquiry if the stigma is so overwhelming that just daring to be part of a NASA research team elicits such a vitriolic response. Therefore, one of the most important actions that can be taken relative to exposing the truth of UAP is to combat the stigma. And this is where I believe that NASA can be eminently helpful. The NASA brand is synonymous with hope, optimism, and credibility. If you were to take a walk down the National Mall, you would immediately see the NASA logo on T-shirts, hats, and bumper stickers. Few federal agencies enjoy this kind of popularity. I've never seen anyone wearing an Office of Personnel Management T-shirt. which is why NASA could play such an influential role. Specifically, NASA could, with relatively little cost and effort, host symposia on UAP, or even just participate in existing panels examining the topic. NASA personnel stepping
NASA 可以
forward
參與
and
啦，
participating in
因為
such
NASA 喺公眾嘅
would make
形
a
象非常之
powerful
好。
statement to the scientific community that UAP should be taken seriously and researched accordingly. In regard to research, NASA has vast archives, much of which may contain important UAP data. Again, for relatively little cost and effort, NASA could create an AI or ML algorithm that could search the agency's archives for anomalous phenomena. I suspect that such an effort would not only result in information that will help us to understand UAP, but
NASA
could
可以
result
做
in
到嘅
data that
好
will
多
assist in
啦，
other areas of scientific inquiry,
向公眾
such as
開一
anomalous
個
weather,
諮詢會又
meteorite
可以啦。
Beyond its existing archives, NASA could act as a clearinghouse for civilian and commercial UAP data. During my work on the UAP Independent Study Team, it quickly became evident that there is no clear or well-publicized process for civilian pilots to report UAP sightings. The stigma associated with UAP hampers the number of
民航機
pilots
師
that
咧冇
report
渠
such
道
phenomena, but
去
even
匯
for those who
報 UFO
overcome the
事件啊，
stigma,
又係
I
講翻
believe
呢樣
the
嘢。
current FAA guidance is largely unknown and poorly understood. In order to effectively collect UAP data, the independent study team recommended the use of NASA's Aviation Safety Reporting System, or ASRS. This system, which is administered by NASA and funded by the FAA, provides a confidential means for the reporting of safety violations in a voluntary and non-punitive manner. Over 47 years, the ASRS has collected nearly 2 million reports. ASRS is the perfect tool to collect UAP data, which could then be collated by NASA and shared with the public at large. Leveraging ASRS could create a treasure trove of UAP data, potentially hundreds of thousands of reports, supporting this hearing's goal of exposing the truth. And I'm grateful to our two co-chairs and other members who have already incorporated this idea into proposed legislation. At this hearing, and as others have demonstrated, the UAP issue is justifiably dominated by national security and defense. However, I would urge the subcommittees to keep in mind the numerous ways that NASA and the FAA, as well as commercial activities in the air, in space, and in the water, can generate a massive amount of invaluable data on anomalous phenomena. I cannot help but be excited by the potential for such an endeavor since scientific discovery is driven by anomalies. It's the existence and study of anomalies that led to the theory of relativity, quantum mechanics, and nearly all of humanity's scientific breakthroughs. This is why the study of UAPs should be embraced, since whatever is occurring, the chance to garner new knowledge
大家係
should
應該
never be
鼓勵研究
We must
UFO
be
現
thorough
象。
in collecting information, fearless in making conclusions, and open to following the data, no matter how mundane
係
or
啦，用
extraordinary
科學嘅
results
精神
may be.
咧去探討
I
UFO
began
事
this
件。
testimony by praising the Joint Subcommittee members for their courage, and I will end by echoing that sentiment. As the saying goes, the truth is out there. We just need to be bold enough and brave enough to face it. Thank you.
都係一般好
Thank you
科
all.
學家嘅
I
講
will
法
now
啦。
recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. I have a
好啦，
lot of
問問題環
questions.
節。
And I have a lot of witnesses. So I would just ask
Oh.
if it's yes or no to please just tell me yes or no. If it requires more than that, be very succinct because I would like to go down the line and ask as many questions as possible. So for the Admiral this morning first, former DOD official Chris Mellon reached out to you about satellite imagery from 2017 that depicts the
衛星相片。
UAP. What were the dates in 2017 when this occurred?
2017幾
I
時
can't
發
share
生
with？you the details, ma'am, but I can do it in a closed setting, and I can also tell you the agency that wrote a report on it.
Okay, so who has the imagery?
I can tell you that in a closed setting.
Can you describe what was depicted in the
唔可以
satellite
公開
imagery?
講，
Just a
私底下可以
description.
講。
It was a UAP, ma'am.
That's it? No other description?
The term that the analysts used, they called it the button. It was a disc-shaped object.
button 好啦，
Okay,
新資
where
訊
was it?
the button
I can't tell you that, ma'am.
Okay.
類
All
似
right.
粒
Mr.
紐嘅 UFO
Elizondo,
啊。
you stated in your testimony that,
啊
quote,
終於有
advanced
新嘢聽到啦。
technologies not by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe, end quote. If these technologies are not made by any government,
好啦，
who's making them?
唔係
Private
人類嘅科
companies,
技。
or are you implying they are crafted by a non-human
唔係政府
intelligence?
嘅科技。
Well, ma'am, that's precisely why we're here. The problem is that, temporally speaking, over decades, not just the last 10 years, To put this in perspective,
Are these private companies you're implying, or is this non-human intelligence?
It may be both.
Okay.
When it comes to Blue Force Technologies, I would not be able to discuss.
Okay. Are you read into secret UAP crash retrieval programs?
We would have to have a conversation in a closed session, ma'am.
都係
I
咯，
signed
唔肯公
documentation
開講，私
3
底
years
下可以
ago
講
that。restricts my ability to discuss specifically crash retrievals. I submitted for my book through the DOPSR process, which took a year for it to be reviewed. And what is in the book is what I was told I'm allowed to talk about.
Has the
俾我講
government
返佢本
conducted
書啦。
secret UAP crash retrieval programs? Yes or no?
Yes,
Okay. Were they designed to identify and reverse engineer alien craft? Yes or no?
yes.
Does the U.S. government have any reverse? Okay, we already answered that question about retrieval programs. Do any
政府
U.S.
有 UFO
contractors
殘
have the
骸。
same?
I would prefer to address that in a closed session, ma'am.
Okay. In your book, you mentioned government employees who've been injured by UAPs, placed on leave, and receiving government compensation for their injuries. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How can the government deny we have recovered craft if they're paying people because they've been injured by recovered craft?
Ma'am, that's a great question. That's why I think we're here again, because I've seen the documentation by the U.S. government for several of these individuals who have sustained injuries as a result of a UAP incident.
It's a crazy idea, right? The hypocrisy and the logic. Okay, Mr. Schellenberger, I'm going to say it again to be very clear. Immaculate Constellation. What's its mission and how are they funded?
Its mission is to, as I stated, its mission is to, it's an unacknowledged special access program. Its mission is to document UAPs.
Okay, and do you, for your story and your report, do you have more than one credible source?
I do.
Sourcing, okay.
I do.
And then why do you believe your sources to be credible? How do you judge the veracity of the documentation you've been provided about this program?
佢頭先點解咁大聲講 Immaculate Constellation 咧？因為成日都有傳話你公開講呢兩個字咧，就會俾人監察啦。咁我講嘅冇事啦，咁但係佢哋呢啲 level 嘅人，如果公開講咧，就會俾情報人員監察啦。
Would they have included non-government
所以頭先啊 Nancy Mace 咧就咁大聲講呢兩個字。
These are, I'm comfortable saying that these are government or
咁
previously government employees.
向你提供、向你爆料嘅人信唔信得過咧？係咪真係信得過咧？佢而家就話係佢查證過信得過嘅。
What's the key takeaway, just a few seconds, about the Immaculate Constellation document you provided us today?
I think that what the American people need to know is that the U.S. military and intelligence community are sitting on a huge amount of visual and other information, still photos, video
國防
photos,
部
other
有大量
sensory
UFO 嘅資訊
information, and
冇
they
公
have
開
for a
到，
very long time.
佢想
And
講
it's
嘅
not
就係咁
those
樣啦。
fuzzy photos and videos that we've been given. There's very clear
High res.
images, high resolution.
非常高清大圖。
Visuals, graphics, videos, photos.
I mean, I've been told hundreds, maybe thousands. I mean, I also wanted to say, because there was some conversation around concern around the revealing of these materials, revealing the source collections, but some of these are shot from helicopters using normal videos of oceans. I just think that's absurd that somehow you're going to be revealing some secret U.S. technology by revealing that you've photographed orbs off the coast of Kuwait.
Okay, thank you. I have 8 seconds. Mr. Gold, did the NASA independent study team get briefed on what you call OSAP? Very quickly.
I flagged the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Classification Program to our chair and our DFO. We did not get briefed, but I believe it is definitely worth looking into. That was probably the largest UAP review effort ever, and I think produced a lot of interest data, including revealing Nimitz. I don't know if my fellow witness Lou might want to, he did yeoman's work on it, might want to comment.
Okay. All right, I'm going to turn to Mr. Moskowitz, who will be recognized for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So, Mr. Gold, you gave a whole diatribe for a couple of minutes about UAPs, science, data collection, stigma. A lot of non-believers in all of this would just ask a very simple question. Why? Why is it so hard, right? Like, why are people, anytime they ask, why are they always thwarted? Why are they always judged? Why is they always have misinformation spread? Why is there always retribution? Why is it always met with an ear? What's the why? If it doesn't exist, why is it such a problem?
I think if you go through the history of science, Representative, it is always difficult for breakthroughs and new information, regardless of whether it's UAP or any other kind of discovery. And in science, we're supposed to be open, but when you break with the orthodoxy of what's believed, whether it's Galileo saying that the Earth doesn't rotate, or the Earth rotates around the sun, or the sun doesn't rotate around the Earth. It's always challenging for new beliefs. And the more extraordinary those discoveries, the more
睇翻過
extraordinary
往
those
科學
new
界嘅
beliefs,
歷史咧，每次講新嘢咧，都係俾人 都係好難嘅。
There's natural conservatism that when it comes to science,
就
but
算
this issue
伽利略
in
當年
particular
話
has been
太陽唔係圍住地球轉咧，都係不停俾人攻擊嘅。
study it becomes
伽利略係俾人
But every hearing,
好似俾人困住咗噶嘛，因為佢講嘅嘢。
every news report, every video, documentaries. I was privileged to be a part of something Dan Fair is putting together. I think many of us have interviewed for it. Documentary over 30 different government officials. Every brick in the wall will help get us closer to getting to the truth.
I appreciate that. Mr. Elizondo, did I have that correct?
Sir.
I'm a recovering lawyer, so I'm going to put my hat on for a second. You said you signed a document. Love that. Who gave that to you?
The U.S. government, sir.
Okay, you have a copy of it?
It is stored in a SCIF right now. I do not have possession of it. The U.S. government does.
What department of the U.S. government gave you this document?
I will say the Department of Defense. Unfortunately, I can't say in this forum much more than that.
You specifically said the document said you can't talk about crash retrieval. Well, you know, you can't talk about Fight Club if there's no Fight Club.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, I'm just making an observation. So that document that you signed, that you said exists, specifically said
佢話你簽咗份文件咧，唔可以提及美國政府有收埋 UFO 科技。咁咪即係間接講咗係有 UFO 科技咯。如果唔係，點解要簽份咁嘅嘢啫？
Give me the atmosphere of signing this document. You're in a room by yourself?
I'm in a SCIF with a security officer, sir.
Just one-on-one? Anybody else?
There may have been an assistant as well. It was in a SCIF within a Department of
即係話
Defense
如果學校冇人講 ，OK。
My background is I went to school to study microbiology and immunology, entered into the U.S. Army, and after a very short stint in military intelligence, I became a counterintelligence special agent. As a civilian, later on,
佢嘅意思就係話點解要叫你簽份嘢叫你唔好講咧？就係因為有呢件事先叫你唔好講啊嘛。即係啲學校叫人唔好亂拋垃圾，就係因為有人抌垃圾先要叫人唔好亂拋垃圾啊嘛。即係個邏輯係咁樣。
When I came back to the Pentagon after a tour with the Director of National Intelligence, I quickly became part of a program that was originally called OSAP that evolved into the program now called ATIP, which is where those videos that we now see, the Go Fast, the Gimbal, the FLIR, that was part of our effort, sir.
Right. So you're not some conspiracy theorist. You actually have a legitimate background.
Well, sir, I'm certainly not a conspiracy theorist. I'm fact-based, just say facts.
So when you're in this room, I want to paint the picture of everybody. You're in this room, you're by yourself, you're in a SCIF, you're handed a document. How long is the document?
It's about a page front and back. So basically, you have some things they call trigraphs, which I cannot, again, talk to.
How long were you given to sign the document?
As long as I needed, sir.
And what if you didn't sign it?
Well, I suspect there'd be repercussions. I wouldn't have access to certain information.
Were you allowed to ask a lawyer, or weren't allowed to ask for a lawyer to review the document?
It wasn't an option, but they probably wouldn't have allowed me to, because the document itself is pretty explicit about you have to be. Wait, you're putting me in an interest. Let me try to thread the needle here. There are certain documents that we have in the U.S. government that allow people to have access to certain programs, whether it's a special, and I'm going to be very generic here, whether it's a special access program or a controlled access program, SAP, CAP, whatnot.
How many people have to sign that document?
It depends how many people are going to get access to the information, sir.
Okay. Last question. Doctor, real quick, can you tell us about the Omaha incident in greater detail? I've read your background, right? Some people would label you as a member of the deep state. Since you worked in government for a long period of time. But can you tell us more about that incident? You've written a lot about that.
I wrote a lot about incidents like it, Congressman, but that specific incident involved the USS Omaha, the littoral combat ship of the U.S. Navy operating off Southern California. I don't remember the exact date. It was within the last decade. And what the watchstanders on the bridge observed was a UAP, again, something that was aloft but had no observable exhaust or control surfaces. So it was something that couldn't be explained. And then they saw it enter the water from the atmosphere and going through the air-sea interface, and so thus exhibiting trans-medium travel.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. I'll now recognize Mr.
Trans-medium
Berthman for 5
travel
minutes of questioning.
Yeah, we'll start with
喺水又得，喺空中又得。
During a previous UAP hearing, Navy Commander David Fravor discussed the TikTok object engaged in 2004. Are you familiar with the incident, the TikTok incident?
Yes, sir.
That's almost 20 years ago, right?
Yes, sir.
It's been said there are more videos, documents, and reports related to this incident. Do you believe the information regarding the TikTok incident should be available to all members of Congress? And in your expertise, what reason would the Department of Defense possibly have for not releasing information that's over 20 years old?
Thank you, Congressman. I don't think there's any good reason to withhold information and important data, especially of national security concern, from Congress.
What would they say?
I will speculate, sir, that they don't want to share that kind of information because it reveals weaknesses in our ability to monitor and protect our airspace.
Okay. In your written testimony, you claim last year's UAP hearing before this Oversight Committee confirmed that UAP-related information is, well, it's not only being withheld, but that elements of the government are engaging in a disinformation campaign to include personal attacks designed to discredit UAP whistleblowers. Could you elaborate on that statement a little?
Yes, sir. Earlier this year, I met with the DoD's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, and what I thought would be a 90-minute meeting just to meet with leadership turned out to be an hours-long influence operation on me, where they attempted to convince me of the validity of the very flawed and error-ridden historical records report.
國防部嘅部門咧，不停同佢講你嘅資料係錯嘅。
Have me question very valid UAP reports like the Tic Tac incident, and even coming to stating possibly that the Tic Tac was American technology. And then, of course, if you ask David Fravor or Alex Dietrich, the two witnesses, they were convinced it was otherwise. And then, and they also cast discredit on various UAP whistleblowers and witnesses to question their validity and credibility as witnesses.
Okay. We'll go to Mr. Elizondo. Hope I got that right, or not at least
Close
not
enough,
that right. You're familiar with the recent drone incursion over Langley Air Force Base?
Yes, sir.
The owners of these drones remain unclear. The U.S. military has not been able to give us in Congress an answer. Given your experience with the Department of Defense and the intelligence community, how frequently are UAP sightings over military installations?
經常發生嘅會話。
I suppose
This happens all the time, sir.
Incursions over just, say, regular airports. Is it obvious these incursions are more likely over military facilities than just a random airport out there?
Yes, sir. There's definitely enough data to suggest that there is certainly some sort of relationship between sensitive U.S. military installations, also some of our nuclear equities, and also some of our Department of Energy sites.
軍方基地發生多好多嘅民航基地。
Some of your colleagues may have documentation.
UFO 現象成日都係喺軍方嘅基地發生。
This is not a new trend. This has been going on for decades, and that information has been obfuscated, unfortunately, from folks like you in this committee. And I think that's problematic because ultimately, at the end of the day, we have a significant situation here. We have something that can enter into U.S. airspace completely with no attribution.
And how long has this been going on?
Sir, decades. And there's information that will hopefully be entered into the record.
Can you think of any possible reason why they can't release any information they have on something, say, 15 or 20 years old?
Sir, if I could echo my colleague here, Admiral Gallaudet, I think one of the big issues that we have in the intelligence community, Department of Defense, is we don't want to broadcast any potential vulnerabilities or weaknesses in our national defense systems or our intelligence collection platforms. Therefore, when you have a conversation where you address a problem for which there is no
佢就話國防部公開啲資料咧，就會揭露咗佢哋嘅弱點，就係一路國防部唔公開資訊嘅原因啦。
You're here today is because you published an article on the news publication that you own called Public, right? Alleging that a new unnamed government whistleblower has come forward asserting that a highly classified program exists dedicated to recovery and reverse engineering of UAP technologies. Can you give us what specific evidence you have or that your source provided you to substantiate the claims about the existence of the Immaculate Constellation program?
Well, you have the report in front of you now, so you can see it for yourself. I checked the report, and I did not find it based on existing cases. It was new cases for me. I hadn't found anybody, so that answered for me that it was not obviously circular reporting, which is one of the big concerns in this space. I also had the name of the program confirmed by more than one additional source. So yeah, and then of course I checked to make sure that the source was who they claimed to be.
Okay.
I should also say that when I said before it was this database, it is a much broader program than that. It also includes human intelligence, and then, as you mentioned, the retrieval and the reversal.
Any knowledge of what country these things originated in?
No, I have no idea.
呢條友問啲問題
Okay, I will
啦，
now recognize Mr. Burchett for 5 minutes of questions.
佢哋之前
Thank
都
you,
答
Chair
過晒。
Lady. Our request unanimous consent to enter into the record documents provided to us regarding legacy UAP programs and psychological operations. Lou Elizondo.
So ordered.
I also want to thank my buddy Jeremy Corbell for providing us documents and access to some whistleblowers. Mr. Elizondo, what is your last position with the federal government?
Sir, I was the Director of National Program Special Management Staff managing a White House Special Access Program on behalf of the National Security Council.
How would you characterize UAPs?
An enigma, sir, and a frustration. We are talking about
係一個謎啊。
technologies that can
UFO 係一個
outperform
謎。
anything we have in our inventory. And if this was an adversarial technology, this would be an intelligence failure eclipsing that of 9/11 by an order of magnitude.
Are there classified
佢一
Department
路
of
都覺得
Defense
咧 UFO
materials
係
related
對
to
於
UAPs that you
人
believe
類
can
係
be
有
safely
威脅
disclosed
㗎
to the public without compromising
因為佢
national
之前咧都係處理
Yes,
911
sir, I
嘅
do.
事件
I
啦
would。never ever try to endorse providing some sort of information that could compromise what we call a blue force technology or capability. But I do believe there's a lot of information regarding this topic, and I've been very vocal about it, that should be shared not only with the public, but most importantly, with members of Congress.
Are you familiar with my friend David Grush?
Absolutely, sir. I had the privilege and honor of working with him myself several years ago at U.S. Space Force.
Last year, as you know, he testified that the U.S. has run a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Are there UAP programs operating without proper congressional oversight?
100%.
冇議會監察啦。
Unfortunately, sir, I would have to have that conversation in a closed session.
I know you said that, and a lot of people are frustrated with those kind of answers, but we're asking those kind of questions so you all know what the heck we're up against. You also mentioned in your opening statement that the Pentagon's Public Affairs Office employs a psychological operations officer as the singular point of contact for UAP-related inquiries. Why the heck would they do that?
Sir, that's a great question. I would ask the Pentagon. There's a long history here of that individual providing misleading and false information to the public through various news outlets and media outlets in order to discredit this topic. I've personally been victim to it. We have the documentation to substantiate where this information has been absolutely inaccurate, that has been provided time and time again, and it turns out that that individual was also working with former leadership of Arrow at the time as well.
And we punish them by giving them multi-million dollars more than they ask for every year. Admiral Gallaudet, you mentioned in your opening statement on an email you received from the operations officer of the Fleet Forces Command regarding unknown objects almost colliding with U.S. military planes. Did anyone respond with knowledge of what the objects were?
I received no response, sir.
Did the exercise get canceled?
The exercise did not get canceled.
Why do you think the commander of Fleet Forces operations officer never discussed the incident again?
Sir, I'm speculating because I didn't have an exchange with him, but I believed it to be part of a special access program, the information and the video, which we have known now it was, and he realized he couldn't share that openly with the recipients of the email, and therefore the email was pulled from everybody's account.
Again, tell us what happened to the email from the commander of Fleet Forces.
The day after I received it, and all the other recipients received it, which were all the subordinate commanders of U.S. Fleet Forces, so 1- and 2-star admirals, including strike group commanders, the email was wiped or deleted from our accounts, and then no one talked about it.
All right. Have you specifically had any experience with submersible objects?
Sir, I've no personal experience, but I've had witnesses on submarines come to me and say they've seen on sonar data.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah,
how would you
USOs.
Characterize those, and how do they move?
The one instance that was revealed to me was in the 80s on a nuclear-powered submarine, a ballistic missile submarine, that the object exhibited the characteristics of a Russian torpedo in terms of its speed of movement, and closing rate with the submarine, and then it slowed and followed the submarine slowly in its wake for a period of minutes, and then rapidly exited the scene. And nothing that we know of and technology-wise could replicate that.
有一次咧，有個疑似係俄羅斯嘅魚雷向佢哋嘅潛艇靠近， 佢從來冇見過啲咁嘅嘢㗎。
It was on the order of a torpedo. So
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. But as it exited,
Well, I don't exactly know how fast a torpedo is, but I expect it does better than my old outboard Scott Atwater, so I'll take that as a yes.
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Have you experienced any experience with the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARROW?
Yes, Congressman, as I mentioned previously, I have met with them.
Okay. You heard Mr. Elizondo describe psychological operations for those contacting the Department of Defense about UAPs.
而家就喺度攻擊緊 Arrow 啦，就話 Arrow 咧係
Why are federal agencies
從來都冇
in running information
冇動力咧去揭露真相，甚至咧令到件事更加模糊。
Yes, sir. But I'll make a statement on
Hey.
Arrow's behalf. They have new leadership. The office has reached out to me to meet again, and I take that as a good faith effort, and we'll see where that goes.
Thank you, Chair Lady. I've run over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tennessee. I would now like to recognize Mr. Higgins. You're the king of Tennessee. Mr. Higgins, you're recognized for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Elizondo, Mr. Schellenberger notes in the report that we've been given for this hearing. I believe, Mr. Schellenberger, let me shift you with the author of this report.
I'm sorry, sir, I'm not the author
Mr.
of...
Schellenberger, were you the author of this report?
No, I
There's
was
no
not.
name on it.
No.
Do you know the author?
I do.
You do. And how would you estimate that madam or gentleman, the author?
The person is a current or former U.S. government employee.
And it states here that this is the public version of the author's report.
Yes.
So where might one find the non-public version of the author's report?
I don't know the answer to that.
Would that be with the Department of Defense?
I don't know.
But you do know the author.
I do.
You know what the author's sources were?
The author's sources are described in the report. These databases, the Immaculate Constellation.
Right, but you expressed some confidence in the sources.
I would.
Earlier in
I do.
testimony, you expressed confidence. So do you know those sources?
I do.
Are they within the Department of Defense?
I can't say.
You can't say or you won't say?
I won't say.
Okay, why not?
Because I protect my sources, and I think the reason.
But you're not naming them. It's a big department. But many of us on my side of the aisle would say it's far too big. So you're talking about the Department of Defense, sources from within the Department of Defense?
I'm not willing to reduce the
Okay.
potential universe of where my sources might be.
Okay, moving on. In this report, Mr. Elizondo, for reference, several types of allegedly alien craft or possibly alien craft or unknown aerial phenomena, what we used to call UFOs, are described. Spheres and orbs, discs and saucers, oval or tic-tac, triangular shape, boomerang and arrowhead, and irregular or organic. Mr. Elizondo, does that summarize to you the types of craft that we're discussing today?
Sir, that is a general morphology, historically speaking, of many UAP.
So those descriptions are very different craft. Is it your assessment that they would come of different origins?
It's possible, but it's also could be a matter of utility. And let me just state for the record, I never read the report that or the article that Mr. Schellenberger put out. The reason
That's a good point. We're just referencing it.
Yes, sir.
For descriptive purposes for the American
條講嘢好 hea 咁樣，
Mr.
個語調。
Schellenberger, in this report, it's striking to me that regarding the descriptions of experiences with these various craft, several of them include biological effects and several do not. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so spheres and orbs, triangular craft, and irregular or organic craft
點解會咁樣講
includes some
嘅？
descriptions of biological effects, including feelings of unease, electronic device malfunctions, long-term psychological effects such as anxiety or insomnia have been noted, feeling of being watched, a shared awareness with the triangle craft, and
個 report 就話目擊到啲球體嘅人咧，UFO 嘅人咧個心理狀況咧都有啲影響，
physical sensations of warmth or cold and
就有啲三魂唔見七魄咁樣。
psychological distress. So these are very specific descriptions of the reactions of human beings, which allegedly have been noted from a study here, a report. All of those experiences would have been described by the sources that the author used.
I'm not sure I understand.
This is a very broad description of biological effects, and it's striking to me that they are present with relation to some types of craft, but absent in others. This would require a great deal of research and study. Can you explain that?
My understanding is that this is, the database is very large. It includes both the images, the videos, the still images, as well as the human intelligence, the reports, the raw data from individuals having these experiences. So in answer to your question, yeah, I mean, I think we're looking at a very large amount of data collected over many decades.
And that data is held by the Department of Defense?
Well, I will say that after I published, I was told that this program, that the USAP was actually managed by the Department of Defense, but held at the White House.
Roger
But
that.
that's a single source, and I don't have multiple sources to verify that.
Thank you, sir. I did my best to trick an answer out of you, but I was partially successful. Madam Chair, I yield.
白宮嘅計劃嚟嘅，不過就由國防部去處理
Thank you, Madam Chair. In
去實
addition
行
to。serving on this committee, the Oversight Committee, I also serve on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, where we often discuss how essential data and evidence are used in science and used at departments such as NASA. During a hearing, NASA Administrator Nelson affirmed the importance of NASA in helping us to understand UAP. Mr. Gold, if the government doesn't have the data it needs on UAP because, say, someone who saw something is concerned about stigma, public backlash, etc., or maybe there's just not good systems in place, how are we supposed to ultimately figure out what's going on?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And let me compliment Administrator Nelson that there wouldn't have been a UAP independent study team if it wasn't for his leadership and courage. We're talking about data and where we can get data from. As I described, NASA has whole archives of data, much of which I believe will likely have information that will help inform UAP. We need only look. And again, in an era with AI and ML, we can relatively quickly and easily go through it. So I think it's something that we should encourage NASA to do. However, per Chairman Grothman's comment about UAP focusing on national security sites, I believe there's something, sir, that you may have heard of called sensor bias. That because we've got more cameras, more monitoring of national security, we don't know how extensive UAP activity may be over civilian areas. And this is to the second part of your question where we're not collecting the data. We're not collecting sufficient data from pilots. We're not collecting sufficient data from civilian and commercial activities. And this is, again, where ASRS, I think, could substantially change that, get the data out there, and allow us to do good science.
Thank you. I mean, on the data, you know, I'm a really big proponent of transparency. But obviously, there's always a little bit of balance that we have to have in government on transparency as well. I mean, last year, NASA appointed a director of UAP research in response to the recommendation by the independent study team. In the final report, there's a quote, despite numerous accounts and visuals, the absence of consistent, detailed, and curated observations means we do not presently have the body of data needed to make definite and scientific conclusions about UAP. Can you just talk really quickly about that balance of security and transparency?
So I can say, having served at NASA, it is the most transparent organization I've ever been in. When we would have conversations of executive leadership, things would leak out almost instantly. So I can assure you, intentionally or not, NASA's very transparent. I don't know if many of you have worked with engineers or scientists. They love to talk. So I believe that NASA is a paradigm of transparency, but we must have the ability and the data to be able to be transparent with. And if we're not gathering that, if we're not looking at it, then we can't bring NASA into the game and get to that good science that you need.
You know, it was about a year ago, I was touring a facility with a pretty senior government official. We went by a certain hangar, and they said, yeah, that's, you know, a company leases that out. We don't really know what's going on in there. We have no way of knowing what's going on in there. And there was a few of those, in fact, while we were driving around this facility. To what extent do you think that some of the UAP out there comes from off the books or unauthorized experimental aircraft?
I mean, I think probably the vast majority of UAP are drones, experimental aircraft, weather conditions, which is, again, why I say if we review the data, I think we're going to discover a lot about things we weren't even thinking about. But there is a percentage that isn't. And looking into those anomalies is how discoveries will be made. And relative to science, Congressman, if I can say, when NASA studies black holes, when NASA studies galaxies, we have instruments that are tailored to do so. With UAP, we're using cockpit gun cameras or cell phones. We could never do good science with that. And let me tell you, the NASA budget is under pressure. We need to make sure that the Artemis program is funded fully. We need to beat China to the moon and maintain our presence in low Earth orbit. So NASA would need more money to do this, but I think tailored instruments that would look at UAP in the same way that we have tailored instruments to look at astronomical data is important to gathering valuable and uniform information. If we were studying black holes by using fighter cockpit cameras, we probably wouldn't know that much about black holes.
要有合適嘅儀器
Well, I think it's important that
去監察
federal
UFO
leaders
現象。
take the necessary steps to ensure that UAP does not pose threats to the American public as well, and that we have the necessary budgets to collect this data so we can actually see what's going on. And I'm fully supportive of funding the Artemis mission. I think it's very important. Also, a personal note, the pilot is a frat brother of mine. He is a member of the Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, and so I would love to see my fraternity make it to the moon.
But Redwire is building the cameras for Artemis, so we will take some pictures of your frat brother and get them.
There we go. Thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you. I will now recognize Ms. Luna for 5 minutes of questioning.
Mr. Elizondo, to your knowledge, can you name the country and around time frame that the first back-engineered UAP program started?
Ma'am, unfortunately, I would not be able to have that conversation in public.
Can anyone on the panel name that?
應該係意大利佢想講，
None of you?
冇人夠膽講。第一單
This
第一
next
單
question
UFO
is
事
for
喺邊度發生？
Mr. Gallaudet. To your knowledge, have any USOs ever outpaced our submarines?
Yes, ma'am.
At what magnitude?
I don't have the exact speed, but again, a witness came to me, a credible former submarine officer who observed it on sonar data. And this was in the 80s in the North Atlantic during a storm, and it outpaced his submarine by orders of magnitude.
Are you aware of any hotspots that currently exist off our shores in North America?
Not with sufficiently credible data, ma'am.
Okay, we've heard reports of there potentially being hotspots, maybe entry and exit points. Have you heard of any of that?
I have it not, ma'am, but my colleague here, Mr. Elizondo, does discuss some USO activity that he's observed in certain DoD data.
UFO 出現嘅熱門地
Mr. Elizondo,
址
in
喺邊度啦
regards？ to these aircraft being piloted by whatever they might be, non-human biologics, would you agree that it's likely that they are being piloted by some mind-body connection?
Ma'am, I think it is safe to presume here that they are being intelligently controlled because some cases seem to anticipate our maneuvers, and in other cases they seem to, I came across an email where the word stalked was used in a very secure email between Navy officers discussing their ships being pursued by a UAP.
對啲船被跟蹤啊，所以啲 UFO 咧係有知覺佢哋做緊啲咩嘅。
interdimensional beings. Can you speak on that at all?
Ma'am, I'm not qualified, certainly as a scientist or otherwise, to speculate points of origin. I looked at everything from a scientific perspective. So if you look at, for example, instantaneous acceleration, which was one of the observables of the program that I belong to, ATIP, the human body can withstand about 9 G-forces for a short period of time before you suffer negative biological consequences, blackouts and ultimately redouts and even death. Comparison, our best technology, the F-16, which is it's an older platform, but one of our most highly maneuverable aircraft, manned aircraft, made by General Dynamics, can perform about 17 or 18 G-forces before you start having structural failure, meaning that the airframe begins to disintegrate while you're flying. The vehicles we're talking about are performing in excess of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 Gs.
So are you, I guess, would it be safe to infer that they're living craft?
You know, I'm not prepared at this point to state for the record is something alive or not, because even that definition is hard. There was a time in science we thought that life required oxygen, and we now know that's not true. There are anaerobic bacteria that thrive in oxygen environments that lack oxygen. And so also same with photosynthesis. When I was in college, I was told everything is derived from photosynthesis as a form of energy. In reality, that's not true. There are things that live off of chemosynthesis. So we're constantly having to reevaluate our understanding of what the definition of life is.
Do any of you ever come across reports from people that claim to have firsthand experiences with these entities, whatever they might be, or these aircraft, and then as a result, whether or not they're religious, find that these things will automatically disappear? Anyone, and this is open to any of you on the panel. So just real quick, because I'm running out of time. Lou?
Ma'am, I've always been a nuts and bolts kind of guy. When I was at ATIP, I was focusing more on the performance characteristics and less on the potential occupants.
Okay, the reason I ask is because it seems like, just based on our conversations, that we've had people that say that there are good and bad of whatever these things are. And so my
Gary Nolan講嘅嘢。
perspective is A, that true? B, are you guys hearing the reports of that? And C, I think moving forward in regard to technology, Mr. Gold, if you can answer this real quickly, some of these aircraft, it seems that they are operating off of energy that we don't currently have. But just yes or no, in your opinion, if we were able to obtain that, would that...
好似係有聽網台節目喎，呢個 Mrs. Luna。
Would certainly save us some money on funding on Artemis.
Definitely.
And this is a national security issue, that if there is such technology out there, we're not the only country that might have access to it. We don't want to be on the wrong end of technological surprise.
Okay. Thank you guys for your time.
All right, thank you. I will now recognize Mr. Garcia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and I apologize for stepping out. My governor is here upstairs, so I'm trying to get in between meetings, so apologize for that. I want to just start by just asking everyone on the panel or witnesses, and I had a chance to read all the testimony before, but just to set the agenda, just if we can go down real briefly, do you believe, just for the record, that the federal government, any part of the federal government, is knowingly concealing evidence about UAPs from the public?
Yes, sir.
100%.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I also want to just go down the line. I know many of you have already said this, but I just, for the record again, just briefly, what do you believe UAPs could be or are?
Wow.
Strong evidence that they are non-human, higher intelligence.
I echo my colleague's comment, sir.
Genuinely do not know.
Don't know, but we must find out.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate those answers, gentlemen. I think this is obviously another remarkable hearing with just really important information, so I thank all of you for answering the questions. Admiral, I just want to go back to one thing. Now, last year, our subcommittee heard from 2 retired Navy pilots, Lieutenant Ryan Graves and Commander David Fravor, regarding UAPs. Actually, I think Ryan is here in the audience and been a great person to get to know and to have conversations with. He, of course, has been involved in the Safe Airspace for Americans Act with Chairman Graves, with Chairwoman Mace for UAP reporting by civilian aviation personnel. Can you discuss briefly why it's important for civilian pilots to be able to report UAPs and why these legal protections are critical for our national security?
Yes, Congressman, thank you. And I did invite Ryan Graves is my guest, as I'm on his advisory board for the Americans for Safe Aerospace, and the legislation that you supported and introduced, I fully support as well. And I think it's important that more civilian pilots, commercial pilots, report so we can better understand and learn and do research on UAP, as well as remove the stigma so more citizens report on what they observe. And also, it'll only contribute to aviation safety when we have a better understanding of where these UAP are, how they operate, and at what frequency and what capability level. So it's important for aviation safety, and it'll be important for moving science and research forward.
Thank you, sir. And I just want to reiterate to my colleagues, I mean, this is a very bipartisan piece of legislation, and we just got to continue to get this through the Congress, and it's incredibly important that civilian pilots have the opportunity to safely report the UAPs that they are seeing or encountering in the air. And I can't express how critical this piece of what I believe is a larger collection of evidence and facts actually happened. We've been approached by pilots. I've talked to folks that have been engaged with our office and others, and there is still enormous stigma. And essentially, we don't have a system where folks are feeling free to be able to report what they're seeing. And so I just want to reiterate that advocacy. Mr. Gold, in your testimony, you discuss NASA's Aviation Safety Reporting System, a confidential, non-punitive reporting mechanism. In the Safe Airspace for Americans Act, we explicitly allow for civilian reporting, of course, of UAPs. Can you explain why the NASA task force recommended the use of the Aviation Safety Reporting System?
The Aviation Safety Reporting System is an existing system that is trusted, that has taken hundreds of thousands, now millions of cases. And again, recognizing budgetary constraints, this seemed like the perfect way to be able to gain more data. And when it comes to the stigma, sir, it's something that pilots are used to reporting on, that crew is used to reporting on. So it's a great way to get data, to overcome the stigma without spending really that much more additional money since the system exists. Thank you so much for your support of that. Thank you for what Ryan Graves does. This is a common sense means to expose the truth of UAP for the purpose of this hearing.
Thank you. And I just want to also add, now earlier this year, as part of the House Defense Authorization Bill, the NDAA, I had filed an amendment to include the UAP Disclosure Act, which would create a UAP Records Review Board and exercise of eminent domain over UAP-related material, modeled actually on the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act, which is widely known. Now, the amendment was blocked, but thankfully the Senate included the amendment by Senator Rounds and Schumer for the UAP Disclosure Act. So I just again want to say that we should be pushing and ensuring the UAP Disclosure Act, which is bipartisan in its support, should move forward. And if I can just briefly, particularly Admiral, can you just briefly, as I close my time, explain why the UAP Disclosure Act would be critical for us and our national security?
Thank you, Congressman. Yes, I believe the UAP Disclosure Act is important for national security, as well as advancing potential socioeconomic benefits resulting from UAP research, as well as public safety, as we referred to previously regarding aviation. And this act will allow for greater transparency and open research, and that's why I'm also a member of the UAP Disclosure Fund as an advisor, as in the Sol Foundation, as an advisor, senior strategic advisor, which is advocating for the same.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
All right, thank you. I'd like to recognize Mr. Biggs for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for holding this committee. Thank you to the witnesses. Admiral, the video that is called the Go Fast video, the email that you've talked about being deleted, I just want to briefly cover this. You said that the email, the author was asking whether any of the recipients were aware of the classified technology demonstrations that it could explain the objects that were observed. And then you said the email disappears. Then you guys have a series of meetings. The commander of fleet forces and his operations officer never discussed the incident again. Is that right? Is that accurate?
That's accurate, sir.
And even during weekly meetings, it was never discussed again. My question for you is, you were in those meetings. Did you personally hear that nothing was going on about that?
Yes, sir. I was in those meetings, and
did you make inquiries about that?
No, I did not, sir, because I inferred, since I had been read into other special access programs, that this UAP video was part of one that I was not read into, or any of the recipients, or the author of the email, and that an intelligence agency basically pulled it back and instructed the author of the email, hey, this is, you just conducted what they call spillage into a lower classification level. And when that's done, the procedures are basically to remove any of the communication.
You're going to silo it. So, and you, Mr. Elizondo, you said in your report and your testimony today, a government work on the UAP subject still remains classified. Excessive secrecies led to grave misdeeds against loyal civil servants, military personnel, and the public, all to hide the fact that we are not alone in the cosmos. Fair?
Yes, sir.
All right, and all of you, and Mr. Schellenberger, by the way, I've read several of your books, Mr. Schellenberger, excellent stuff. Thank you. What I would say, too, is you were asked about the veracity of the author of this report. You're comfortable with the veracity?
Yes.
Okay. And then, and I'll get to you in a second, Mr. Gold. We'll talk about Kuhnian and Lakatoshian scientific advancement and how we're obviating that through these processes. But we'll get to that in a sec. Because what I want to really get to is the ultimate question it really becomes this. For what purpose is the federal government overclassifying, because that's what they're doing, they're overclassifying, and forbidding the public for getting access to this? And if you know, if you have an explanation, I'm curious, because I know what I've been told. I just want to know from your perspective, why do they overclassify? Mr. Elizondo, you look like your finger on the button, ready to go.
Yes, sir. Forgive me. I think there's several reasons. I think at the time when this reality became evident to the U.S. government, we were in the middle of the Cold War with then Soviet Union, and we did not want to tip our hands to what our knowledge base was on this topic. We did not want to broadcast that to
Cold War's long over.
It is, sir. It is, sir. There's also then the philosophical argument that the Department of Defense and the intelligence community is solution-oriented. And when you don't have answers, it's a really tough spot to be in.
It's easier to be quiet and suppressed than if you don't have the answer.
Indeed, sir. In fact, there's a very real example when we built the U-2 spy plane and flew it over then Russia, and we're taking reconnaissance. And when we first started flying the aircraft, it flew so high and so fast we thought they weren't tracking us. In reality, they were tracking every flight. It wasn't until the Russians could develop the SA-2 surface-to-air missile and successfully shoot them down.
I would suggest to you also, along with Lakatos and Kuhn, you also have a problem with Kenneth Arrow's path dependence or increasing returns. That's one reason why they won't disclose it. It's too painful to admit. But I just want to read a couple things from Mr. Schellenberger's what he gave to us today, because I think this is interesting stuff, and I just want to convey this to you. On USG networks, there exists infrared footage of and imagery of a grouping of vessels engaged in SIGINT and massive collection at night in a specific area of the Pacific Ocean. This footage, which was in close proximity to the vessels, a large equilateral triangle UAP suddenly appears directly over the ships. These three bright points are seen at each bottom corner of the UAP, which is observed to slowly rotate on its horizontal axis. And he goes on to describe that. And I just want to read one more, and I'm doing this because I think it's interesting. This stuff is interesting as anything. So let's get this one here, right here. While performing a routine airspace surveillance and control mission in the Eastern Air Defense Sector, an F-22 fighter observed multiple UAP contacts at mission altitude. Moving to intercept the F-22 pilot noted multiple metallic orbs slightly smaller than the Sedan, hovering in place. Upon vectoring towards the UAPs, a smaller formation of the metallic orbs accelerated at rapid speed towards the F-22, which was unable to establish radar locks on the presumed hostile UAPs. The F-22 broke trajectory and attempted to evade, but was intercepted and boxed in by approximately 3 to 6 UAPs. And then I'll leave that there. I just have no more time left. Well, she's not looking. So let's just get into let's get into part of this.
I thought I would be saved by the bell.
No. Let's talk about Kuhnian, Lakatoshian type of scientific development, and the problem that we have here is you have institutional blockage of what would be normal development of scientific ideas. And if you want to expand that, Mr. Gold.
We're over time, so be very fast, please.
I'll just say I'm a recovering attorney, so please take it easy on the science. But all breakthroughs have been heretical at first, And that's the challenge that we face, particularly with something as extraordinary as this, which is why gathering the data is so important. And I'll just end by saying, by the way, the overclassification of material is in no way limited to UAP. That is occurring throughout the government, as well as the inability to get people classifications in a timely and efficient manner, and then have those classifications be broad enough to be useful. So this is a larger issue that I hope that Congress will look at.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Biggs. I've been generous. All right, Mr. Burleson, I'll recognize you for 5 minutes of questions, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Elizondo, does any branch of the United States government or defense contractors possess technology?
Sir, there's documentation that I believe was submitted for the record that was approved for release by the U.S. Pentagon, by the Department of Defense Office of Pre-Publication Security Review, and it states one of the reasons why my predecessor program, OSAP, was trying to collect material of unknown origin.
Was it successfully collected?
It was not. What happened is that there was an aerospace contract company that requested to divest itself of the material that was collected in the 1950s. Unfortunately, that didn't actually occur.
So let's dive into that. That's the Bigelow Aerospace, correct? So there was a journalist, Christopher Sharp, who said that there was a transfer between Lockheed Martin, Bigelow Aerospace, and the CIA allegedly blocked this. Can you describe that?
What I can say is that it was blocked. Why it was blocked, I can only surmise. I was part of some conversations later on with some of those contract personnel where they had told all of us that is accurate. What we required was a memo from the Secretary of the Air Force in order to make that complete, and that never occurred. And so when Secretary Mattis became Secretary of Defense, I decided it would be appropriate for me to try to receive a memo from him as SecDef, as Secretary of Defense, if we could not get a memo from the Secretary of the Air Force to transfer that material.
So if that material exists today, who's in possession?
Sir, I wouldn't be able to have that conversation in an open hearing. We'd probably have to have that.
Okay, my question to you then is, if we were in a secure setting, if we were in a SCIF, would you be able to provide or get access to something, whether it's visuals or material that we could put our hands on, or biologics, that would convince me, that would show me that we have non-human origins?
Sir, that decision would not be mine. That would be to the gatekeeper still in the U.S. government.
And who would we, so if you were in our shoes, where would you go from here? How would you get that information? A lot of times we just don't know who to ask because we don't know where to go next. So if you were in our shoes, where would you go?
Well, I prefer to answer that question in a closed session. However, we established AARO for that very purpose, and unfortunately, under its previous leadership, it failed. So one would hope that they would have the authorities necessary to do that. Let's hope that this new iteration of leadership will be successful.
In the discussions, it's simply about material, or is there discussion about it was previously testified that there was biologics that were collected. Are you aware of any of that?
I am, sir, aware of the reporting that biologics have been recovered. Again, my focus was more nuts and bolts, looking at the physical aspects of these phenomena, how they interacted around military equities and nuclear equities. So I'm certainly not a medical expert. I would not be able to probably provide you a whole lot of value in that simply because I don't have the expertise.
But was anything described as that we have possession of bodies?
Yes, yes.
Is it multiple types of creatures, or?
Sir, I couldn't answer that. I can tell you anecdotally that it was discussed quite a bit when I was at the Pentagon. The problem is the supposed collection of these biological samples occurred before my time, in fact, before I was even born.
And was this part of the Lockheed Martin discussion, or was this the biologics is a completely separate?
Separate yet related.
Okay. Has anyone made contact?
Sir, I'm sorry, could you specify?
Has there been any, to your knowledge, any communication with a non-human life form?
So the term communication is a bit of a trick word because there's verbal communication like we're having now. The problem is you also have nonverbal communication. And so I would say definitively yes, but from a nonverbal meaning, when a Russian reconnaissance aircraft comes into U.S. airspace, we scramble 2 F-22s, and we are certainly communicating intent and capability. I think the same goes with this. We have these things that are being observed over controlled U.S. airspace, and they're not really doing a good job hiding themselves. They're making it pretty obvious they have the ability to even interfere with our nuclear equities and our nuclear readiness.
Is the United States government and our contractors, are they pulling technology from this? Or they're reverse engineering this?
Sir, as I previously stated, and please forgive me, I am not authorized to discuss specifics about crash retrievals. I signed documentation with the U.S. government. What I can say was, after a very thorough review process by the Pentagon, what I wrote about, and that was my limit, unfortunately, that I was given.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I would like to recognize Mr. Timmons for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Elizondo, you just said something interesting. You said they don't seem to be hiding. They don't seem to be hiding. The UAP sightings are becoming increasingly brash, if you will. And, we've been hearing about these for years, but they've generally been isolated and not as consistent and over critical military installations. Would you say that's fair? Is this becoming increasingly often? Is it happening more and more?
Great question, sir. Let me see if I can answer this for you. Certainly, there seems to be some indication that they're being provocative, meaning that they're, in some cases, literally splitting aircraft formations right down the middle. So that's an air safety issue. The question is it the frequency increasing? And really the response is it depends. Yes, it's possible that there is an increase in frequency, but it's also possible that there's heightened awareness now, and there's also more pervasiveness of technology out there that's collecting this information and that can record this information. So we're not quite sure yet if it's actually an increase in numbers of these events, or is it that we have better equipment now to record these things, and we have a better ability, if you will, to analyze these things.
It seems that
a lot of these sightings occur near military installations. Do you think that these UAPs are intentionally targeting military installations, or do you think that we have increased abilities to monitor surrounding the military installations?
Sir, maybe both. Part of my concern is we have something in the Department of Defense and the intelligence community called IPB, Initial Preparations of the Battle Space. And we use equities like ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, or other type of equities and technologies to prep the battle space. And certainly, if I was wearing my national security hat, even if there was a 2% chance that there was some sort of hostile intent here, that's 2% higher than we really can accept. And so we must figure out, there's a calculus, capabilities versus intent, in order to identify if something is a national security threat. We've seen some of the capabilities, yet we have no idea in the intent. And so this is why this discussion is somewhat, I think, problematic from a governmental perspective, because we have no idea.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Schellenberger, you're particularly familiar with the Langley Air Force Base incident a year ago? Are you familiar?
Just from what I read in the
Just
news.
from what you've read?
Yeah.
I would imagine a large percentage of the American population became aware of that with the Wall Street Journal article. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And were you aware of that incident prior to the Wall Street Journal article?
No.
To the rest of the panel, was the Wall Street Journal article the first time that y'all were made aware of what was essentially an over 2-week UAP frenzy over Langley Air Force Base? Were y'all aware of this prior to the Wall Street Journal article? Anybody? Show of hands. Yes,
sir.
Dr. Guyette, could you give me how did you become aware of it?
A colleague of mine who I referenced previously, Chris Mellon, he wrote an extensive article about this, that there were other incursions of drones over Langley before this, as well as many, many military installations over the last 5 decades.
And it's my understanding that there's been an ever-increasing in number, and
Langley 單嘢我都要睇
say
返。
this because I wear 2 different hats. I'm still in the Air Force. So, I mean, it seems that they're becoming increasingly brash, and the question that we really have to figure out is it China or is it non-human? And I think that's the biggest question the American people want to know. If it's China, it's scary because they have a lot of technology that we cannot explain. And if it's non-human, that's scary because we don't know the intent. Would you say that's fair?
Yes, Congressman. And in fact, I really believe that we should use this hearing as a catalyst to improve and bolster our air defense capabilities and our maritime domain awareness capabilities, because obviously there are holes in it, whether it be UAP of non-HI direction or NHI direction, or, as you say, sir, China or any other adversary.
Are you all aware of any task force at the Pentagon or in the national security apparatus that's trying to assess the answer to that question?
At the current moment, sir, no, but this is a great point. From 2020 to 2022, there was a UAP task force in the DoD succeeding where Mr. Elizondo worked, led by Jay Stratton, who had the first comprehensive whole-of-government approach to UAP, which involved pathways to declassification and to increase transparency, as well as assessing the national security risks of UAP. This was a really well-established approach, and we have all advocated that something like it return.
I'm running out of time. The last thing is that we need authorities. The law enforcement, military do not have authorities to actually engage, and Congress needs to act to give those authorities to local law enforcement and the military so they have clear guidelines on how to assess these issues going forward. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Ms. Boebert for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now that we have all been cautioned in this committee hearing that the mention of Pentagon's Immaculate Constellation program could put us on a list, well, I already find myself on many lists, I'm sure. So I speak my mind often, so why not just keep going with it? May as well just go all out and say it. The Earth is flat, birds are government drones, and we've never set foot on the moon, and Joe Biden received 81 million votes in the 2020 election. So let's just see how many lists we could get on here today. But Mr. Schellenberger, I wanted to ask you, I think I understand from this hearing that you would agree that classifying information like this is not in the best interest of the people. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, with the caveat that, of course, I would support classification necessary to protect secrets essential to national security, but I think it's pretty obvious that there's overclassification.
Overclassification, yes. And so in most instances, if they can't tell us what, do you think at some point they'll at least tell us why?
You know, President-elect Trump has repeatedly committed to greater transparency, both on the UAP issue, on JFK files, on COVID origins, and many other things. So I think that we need to make sure that the next administration is held accountable for that.
Agreed. And this is for all four of you. Yes or no, please. I have many questions I want to get to. Are there any known instances of recovered materials or technologies that are not of human origin and maybe connected to any advanced bioscience defense programs within the USG?
I don't know.
I wouldn't be able to answer that, ma'am.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay, so there are rumors that have come up to the Hill of a secretive project within the Department of Defense involving the manipulation of human genetics with what is described as non-human genetic material, potentially for the enhancement of human capabilities, hybrids. Are any of you familiar with that? Yes or no?
冇聽過呢單嘢喎。
ma'am.
I am not, ma'am.
I'm not.
No, ma'am.
Okay, I would like to know, with Immaculate
我而家查佢講咩先。
how does this relate to UAP activities, Mr. Schellenberg, in oceanic environments? Are there any instances where the Navy or other maritime forces have encountered UAPs that could not be explained by known technology or natural phenomena?
Yeah, the Immaculate Constellation covers both terrestrial and oceanic, and there's actually a number of cases described in the report that occur in the ocean.
And do you believe that there is a concerted effort by the Pentagon to keep Congress out of the loop regarding these UAP activities, specifically in our waters?
Yes.
I think it's about 5% of our ocean that's actually been studied in detail by man, and we've studied more of space than we had of our own oceans. And so are there any accounts of UAPs emerging from or submerging into our water which could indicate a base or presence beneath the ocean's surface?
I don't know about a base, but as I mentioned, I had a different source entirely describe this pretty extraordinary footage that exists of orbs, of an orb coming out of the ocean and being met by another orb.
Some would say that there's multiple hotspots where we see frequent activity. So in your investigations, have you come across any data or visual evidence like sonar readings or underwater footage of these UAPs?
I have not beyond what's in the report.
You've written about UAPs not only in the air but in underwater. Are there any specifics on what you've learned about the UAP activity in our oceans? Particularly, have you spoken with sources who have provided any evidence or eyewitness accounts of these UAPs interacting with our naval forces or being detected by our underwater surveillance systems?
Nothing beyond what's in the report and then the specific case that I mentioned with the orb.
So this report says it all. There's no other information that we are aware of regarding the activity within our waters.
I have other sources that have told me that have shared a significant amount of information, but they're not comfortable with me sharing it at this point.
Okay. Are there any technological capabilities observed in these oceanic UAPs that seem to defy our current understanding of physics or our engineering capabilities?
It seems like they all do.
Yes, I would agree with that. My time is up, but I do appreciate your bravery, your courage for coming here and speaking today. And it seems like there's still some questions that we need answers to, and we will not relent until we get those to the American people. Thank you all.
Thank you. I move to allow myself and the ranking member 5 additional minutes for questions without objection, so ordered. Mr. Elizondo, were you read into the Immaculate Constellation program?
I would not be authorized to confirm nor deny the existence of any ongoing or past program, especially as it relates to a special access program, either by name or trigraph.
Okay, and then does the U.S. government or private contractors, they work with other foreign countries, China, for example, to exchange data, quote from a source, that intelligence data about UAP?
Let me see if I can answer that a little bit more generally, ma'am, if I may. We do have foreign material exploitation programs. That is something that is widely known, and that term itself is unclassified. How exactly that works becomes a bit sensitive. A discussion we could certainly have in a closed session if you like. We do work with international partners and allies quite often, not just in military exercises and workups, but in other intelligence efforts as well.
In terms of material that's given to private contractors, is certain material given to certain contractors because of their experience? So, for example, if it's related to submerged and undersea propulsion, would it go to a general contractor like General Dynamics?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely correct. Different contractors have different levels of expertise.
What's Lockheed's expertise?
Aerospace, ma'am.
In the UAP space, that's all that, they wouldn't do submerged?
No, I didn't say that, ma'am.
Okay.
Lockheed Martin and others do quite a bit of work both in our atmosphere, in space, and even underwater. There are certain efforts to. It's a tough question you're asking. You put me on the spot here.
I'm looking for the answer.
Yes, ma'am. No, they are involved in a lot. I would rather let Lockheed Martin explain the different domains that they are involved with. Probably am not authorized to discuss that, but they are involved in a lot of different areas and domains.
Admiral, flight safety risks for our pilots, based on what you've experienced and seen in your career.
They're extensive, and the one exercise I referred to where I received the email that was then deleted was the pilots, and this is worth bringing out. There are debunkers out there who have said the Go Fast video was just a balloon. That was only one video that was released. There were dozens of these encounters that pilots, friends of Ryan Graves, who's in this room right here, witnessed and caused significant safety concerns. And to almost call out an exercise and shut it down, which is very compressed, and the carrier's getting ready for deployment, and the pilots have to get certified to land on a carrier. It's extreme, to say the least.
All right, I have two last questions. Real quickly, Mr. Schellenberger, how do we get more whistleblowers to come forward?
Well, this hearing does, is very important, and obviously, I can't encourage whistleblowers to obtain information, but I can guarantee that I will protect them and go to prison to protect their identities. they come to me.
Yes, sir. Okay, my last question. The first hearing we had on this, I'd never been briefed on UAPs or what they were, biologics, non-human, et cetera. How would you define, each of you, my last question, how would you define non-human biologics, non-human intelligence? What are we actually talking about? Admiral, and we'll go down the line.
I don't think it's a stretch when you look at the diversity of life on this planet and the size of this universe to think that there would be more diverse, higher order, non-human intelligences throughout the universe, and that's probably what's visiting us.
I would take the scientific approach. The definition would be the ability to react to a stimulus in a manner that requires an intellectual thought process.
I just don't know.
I think we must be modest in our assumptions that we're looking for intelligence. That could be biological, it might not.
Non-biological, but what non-biological intelligence, what does that mean, though?
Artificial intelligence, ML, machines. We assume that all intelligence would be like us, and every time we look out in the universe, we are humbled relative to what we don't know in terms of the forms of intelligence and what it may take. I can assure you I probably can't ask you your question, but I think the ultimate answer is going to surprise us all.
And then Mr. Garcia, you had a few closing remarks.
I know we're about to hit votes here, so I'll be brief. Just, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank Chairwoman Mace especially for holding this important bipartisan hearing. And I want to thank all the committee members that are interested in this topic. I think our commitment to all of you and all the folks that have contacted us, and certainly to the advocates and the pilots, is that we need to continue investigating UAPs. I think the country the country is owed explanations and ensure that the safety or national security is always protected. This is a conversation and questioning that must continue, so I'm very grateful to all of you. And I also just want to add, just personally, I think it's really important for me, two things guide my questioning and my observations on UAPs. One is we should always be guided by facts, science, and data, and stay serious on those issues. And the second thing is I think that we should not limit our imagination and our thoughts and our curiosity on what UAPs could actually be. And I think those two things for me are really important, and I'm grateful for all of you to be here. So with that, I yield back.
Okay, and we have Mr. Ogles, who is on the way. He's going to be here any second. Is that correct? Want to check, and he'll be the last member with questions that we have today.
我暫時聽到嘅新嘢咧，我聽到就得兩樣啫。就係2017年嗰單嘢咧，就叫做 The Button 啦，有個 UFO 係類似粒鈕咁樣嘅，我會揾翻喺邊度講啊。第二個咧就係頭先嗰個 Miss Bobet 就話有個 program 咧係講關於 enhance human， 又可以關於好似 Marvel Winter Soldier， 好似 Captain America 咁啊，就係令到人類變得更加強嘅，透過運用非人類嘅 DNA， 就話 from the hill 啦 ，from Capitol Hill 啦，我估佢係講。咁我再網上邊睇下有冇資料講啊。咁另外就係話頭先 Go Fast 嗰件事，個 email 係俾人刪咗啦，俾人刪除咗啦。
I will recognize you for 5 minutes of questioning before we head on out today.
同埋 Langley Airspace 嗰單嘢我要再睇一睇嘅。Airspace。
Well, thank you all for being here, and Madam Chairwoman, I'm out of breath because I sprinted to get here, but this is an important hearing. I think we all know that there's something going on. Mr. Elizondo, based on your knowledge of UAP sightings, do you believe it's fair to say that they are especially common near nuclear sites?
Yes, sir. Mr. Congressman, I absolutely am convinced of that, as are my colleagues inside the government.
UFO 同核武咧，佢本書就講好多，我會再出篇整合。
From the beginning is, Oak Ridge is in Tennessee. The so-called weather balloon that drifted, that we now know was controlled, it passed near Oak Ridge. It obviously is a sensitive site, both of interest to our adversaries and to whatever else this is. Because we know that at military installations, at sensitive locations, such as nuclear facilities, that we're seeing this take place. So the question is what is it? Do you believe they've caused an irregular activity, and why might they be interested in those sites?
Sir, in some cases, it's actually regular activity. You'd be surprised. There's actually documentation right now that's been submitted. It's not just Oak Ridge. It's Savannah River Site, SRS. It's also Los Alamos. A lot of our sensitive R&D locations appear to be under some sort of surveillance and monitoring. Why? Well, because a lot of innovation comes out of those areas, a lot of new technologies, a lot of, if you will, disruptive technologies that we use for our national defense originates out of those locations, and advanced concepts in physics as well. So if I was doing any type of reconnaissance, even on a foreign adversary, that's a great target to start with.
Sure, and again, this has been one of my talking points. I do have questions. What role might the Department of Energy or its subsidiaries or affiliates have in this type of technology or possessing this type of technology, whether it's ours or others? Mr. Gallaudet, I think your testimony has been pretty clear, but would you please reiterate that do you believe UAPs pose a threat to pilots? Excuse me.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. They were threatening Navy pilots during the exercise that my people were involved with in 2015, and it's my understanding they're risking pilot safety, commercial and military today.
Well, considering, and I understand that there's a need in some cases to keep certain technologies secret, but you believe that it is posing a threat to our personnel, correct?
Yes, sir.
So I think it's reasonable to conclude that if there is a threat to our personnel who are serving our country faithfully, that there be oversight.
100%, Congressman. And in fact, that's the one thing that we've not talked about enough during this hearing is the fact that the government, executive branch, not sharing with Congress what it knows about UAP infringes on your legislative and oversight responsibilities to such an extent that's very concerning. I mean, what else are we, if you look at national security or intelligence or foreign affairs or appropriations, you all have oversight and legislative responsibility regarding those. This UAP issue may be the greatest issue of our time, and it's being hid from you.
Well, I mean, and to your point, I think we've seen over the decades that we have certain adversaries like China, like Russia, that technologically speaking are not as advanced as us, that they lack some of the lethality that we have, and that we've seen that they've gone after our technologies and in some cases succeeded, in particular with missile technology. And so again, my concern, whether this technology emanates from us or otherworldly, that we know that we possess it. And where's the accountability? Where are the stopgaps? What are the guarantees that if this were to fall in enemy hands, that it isn't immediately weaponized against us? And I'll say this, it is clear from my experience and what I've seen that there is something out there. The question is it ours? Is it someone else's? Or is it otherworldly? And Madam Chairman, I would posit that as the legislative body, as the regulatory body, we must know. And anyone who prevents us from gaining access to that information, I would consider that criminality. Because we have U.S. personnel who may very well be in harm's way. We have technology that ultimately may threaten our very existence. With that, Madam Chairman, I thank you for your indulgence, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ogles. And with that and without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and to submit additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. If there's no further business without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.
好啦，今日嘅 UFO 聽證會咧，去到呢度就完結啦。就大概係11點半開始，2個鐘頭15分鐘。咁咧老老實實咧，比上次仲短啊！上次咧就3個鐘嘅。咁咧有咩新嘅資訊咧？就的而且確唔多啦，冇新嘅相咧，冇新嘅影片啦。咁就係總結翻少少，就係新嘅嘢咧，就係2017年嗰單嘢有個新 term 就係 the button。第二就係頭先嘅發問環節咧，阿 Miss Borbert 咧講到 DNA 嘅嘢啊，講到係類似 DNA engineering 嘅嘢啦。咁我就再上 Twitter 睇下有冇多啲嘅資料啦。第三就係 Langley Airspace 咧，就係講翻上年發生嘅事嘅。咁就係國防部副情報處長啦 前情報處長啦 Christopher Mellon 講 Langley Airspace 嘅嘢咧，咁佢就今次聽證會咧都有交一份手寫嘅 testimony 嘅證供嘅，咁我要再睇翻佢講 Langley Airspace 究竟係講咩啦，同埋就係而家 YouTube 都見到嘅 Go Fast Video 嗰件事入邊咧，就係話大家都有收到 email 嘅，就話個演習咧當時佢哋係做緊 training 噶嘛，就話收到 email 就話有危險發生啊，可能會有相撞嘅情況。咁嗰個警報嘅 email 咧，俾大家警報嘅 email 咧就係刪除咗嘅。咁呢幾樣就係即係叫做新嘅資訊啦。咁同埋就係 Immaculate Constellation 入邊提到嘅兩單嘢，就係 F-22戰機俾一班白色嘅球體包圍住，要逼佢改航線，同埋就係喺科威特嘅沿岸位置見到有水底衝出嚟嘅 UFO， 咁係有片嘅15分鐘嘅高清片段。咁呢啲片段會唔會有一日可以喺公眾嘅眼中見到呢？咁就要再密切留意啦。咁就非常之多謝大家陪咗我3個幾鐘咧，一齊去睇聽證會啦。中間咧確實有啲悶嘅，因為真係講嚟講去都係依山覆皮啊，都係話要透明啦，話政府收埋啲嘢係犯法㗎啦，同埋科學角度啦。頭先 Mike Gold 咧，即係 NASA 嗰個咧，就係完全係科學家嘅主流意見咧，就係話有不尋常現象係應該正面科學嘅角度去睇嘅，搜集 data。佢就係話咧，我哋而家嘅 UFO 嘅資料咧，都係用一啲儀器咧，唔係專貨觀察 UFO 嘅儀器。佢就話我哋應該整一啲儀器係專係用嚟咧收集 UFO 嘅資訊嘅資料嘅，就唔係再用呢啲軍事嘅武器。軍事嘅武器咧就唔係我嚟搜集 UFO 情報嘅。咁佢就話係啦，用科學嘅角度去處理 UFO 事件啦，唔好再戴有色眼鏡啦，因為咧，驟眼睇落去咧，呢啲嘢係對人類有威脅嘅，佢哋做嘅嘢咧係我哋做唔到嘅，係比我哋更加高智慧嘅嘢嚟嘅。咁就而家有問題，佢承認有問題存在，咁就應該用科學嘅角度去了解問題。咁咧就係最好嘅方法嚟嘅，係咯。咁就舉翻以前啲例子啦。以前每次有新發現咧，提出嘅科學家咧都係受到大量嘅批評、大量嘅質疑嘅，就好似伽利略咁樣啦。佢個科學角度係我最欣賞嘅，因為即係大家都即係與其聽啲所謂嘅記者、所謂嘅政府內部情報高層人員講嘢，咁不如就睇下啲科學家點樣科學角度去解釋呢件事，就好過不停你又傳呢樣，佢又傳嗰樣。咁啊睇下，不過大家都係失望噶啦，大家都知道係唔會有第一手資料噶啦，都係佢哋喺度讀，佢哋睇過啲乜嘢，而唔會真係有相片，唔會真係有第一身嘅證人。咁而家有一樣嘢就知道，就講 Lockheed Martin 啦，就係個為美國政府整航空武器嘅公司啦，就話佢哋係收埋咗美國政府嘅 UFO 殘骸，即係以前羅茲威爾事件墜落嘅 UFO 殘骸咧，就係喺啲私人企業度啦。而呢啲私人企業咧喺早年咧係嘗試將呢啲 UFO 殘骸俾翻美國政府嘅，咁但係咧CIA 入邊咧就有人反對，咁就亦都係另外一單資訊啦。咁正式喺聽證會講咗出嚟啦。以前就係傳嘅啫，咁今次就真係 on paper 落咗 record 講出嚟。咁啊係啦，咁多啦。咁我就而家就努力去整片去整合翻所有嘢啦，就非常之多謝大家陪住我一齊睇。有乜嘢咧可以？如果大家想有啲嘢分享下，一齊討論下咧，可以加入個 Discord group 嘅，或者留言啊，乜都好都可以嘅。睇下先 channel， view your channel， 我應該有擺晒啲 link 喺度。咁啊係咯，可以加入 Discord 啦 ，Discord 就可以打乜都得嘅，唔會 ban 你嘅，或者。Twitter 都好，我好鼓勵大家用 Twitter， 因為 Twitter 係一個完全係自由發言嘅地方啦，大家可以好放膽講嘢嘅地方啦。或者 Instagram 我呢排咧就少咗 post 好多嘢啦，咁但係就有啲新嘅 UFO 資訊咧，我都會喺 Instagram 啊喺 Twitter post 嘅。咁 Spotify 就係 聲音檔啦。如果大家唔想嘥 data 咧，就可以上 Spotify 聽翻我嘅片啦。咁就非常之多謝大家陪住我啊！咁就睇下會唔會有更加多嘅聽證會咧，我都係會開直播嘅，或者遲啲咧，甚至直頭去美國去羅茲威爾咧實地考察啦。咁咧就係啦，今日去到咁多先，就已經3個鐘頭15分鐘啦，非常之多謝咁多位啊！好啦，拜拜。